Okay, I want to welcome everyone here and those that are online participating in our meeting. I want to do a roll call.
Mayor Mahler.
Present.
Councillor Gerson.
Present.
Councillor Trask.
Present.
Councillor Goebel.
I'm here.
Councillor Nash. Councillor Gorley.
Here.
Councillor Coleman. Present. Bob Brianna.
Present.
Derek Dix.
Here.
Dave Journey. David Lohman.
Present.
Garrett Schaefer.
Present.
Kenneth Hamlin.
Present.
Lisa Wilson. Here.
Okay. You want to
Me?
do the review and the discussion of the proposals?
Sure. They're printing right now.
Thank you, Brandon.
All right, so we're gonna go through a few things tonight to kind of hit on, first, a couple of corrections to this budget book. They are very minor, so I don't anticipate that we'll have much of an issue with them. We are going to kind of cover, and we'll cover how to read this book that you have in front of you, because we didn't really cover that very well on last Thursday. We're going to cover internal service funds and what those are, and then we'll move into the department presentations from the police department, the library, and community and economic development. And all three of those directors are here so that you can peg them with any question that you can possibly think of.
Nice job.
So with all that being said, we'll move forward. So a couple of quick changes, and thank you to Councillor Coleman for pointing out these two changes that I have for you. On page 42 of your document, we were missing the code enforcement officer in the organizational chart. It is budgeted, the dollars are there. It was an oversight on my part, missed that one position, so my apologies. Secondly, the header on the same page in the KED summary, whoops. You'll notice that it says actual, I think it says actual 18 or 1718, actual 1819 is what it's supposed to say next, instead of repeating actual 1718. So, and then the last column where it gives the comparisons, the percent change from, that should say 1920 budget, which is our current year. Those are the three changes that I have for you. They did not change any numbers. So hopefully you don't have any concerns regarding those changes, but of course, if you have other changes to speak of, I can certainly try to address them. All right, we will move into what is a budget. So we covered this last week. What is a budget? A budget is a communication tool. It's something the city can put out to residents and businesses alike so that folks know exactly what their dollars are being spent on, their tax dollars. It's a vehicle for obtaining public opinions. These are public meetings. The public is invited to join, whether it's in person or in the live feed. It is a tool for financial accountability. Everybody sees everything we have. We are not trying to hide anything. We're trying to be as transparent as possible. Everything is in this book that we can possibly think of. The last thing that we added, which was not here last Thursday, is what we're looking at is the bottom line. These budgets are a guide. Things change during each of these fiscal years, that we do our best to stick with what we've put in front of you. But occasionally opportunities arise or things like COVID appear out of nowhere, that we have to change kind of what our response is in order to address what's happening in the time. So we take the budget that we have and we try to stick within that. It's that bottom line. If we have to, we ask for a supplemental adjustment, which is a separate process outside of this committee where we ask the council for additional expenditure authority. We try to limit what we have to do in that regard. We try to stick within that bottom line. These budgets are guides. They are not gospels. So while you may see that it says we're going to spend $30,000 on a technical services line, that may change. We may take advantage of a cheaper opportunity. We may take advantage of a new software that's being offered to us, and suddenly that 30,000 becomes 45. But we take the other 15,000 from something else in that department. So. Reading your budget document. This document is split into 16 sections based on the tabs in the book. Tabs 1 through 3 cover city information and policy that govern this document and financial reporting for the city. There's a lot of it. If you're a policy person and you love reading that stuff, it's certainly informative and entertaining read. If it puts you to sleep at night, well, I guess at least I gave you something to help put your mind at ease. I'm not going to cover that section really, but if you have specific questions about that, I'm happy to try to address them. Beginning with tabs 4 through 10, those are the department budgets. And that's kind of what we're going to use tonight a lot of. They are broken out by department, non-departmental, executive and legislative, finance, municipal court, community and economic development, police department, library, and public works. So what I wanted to point out on these worksheets is kind of go through the layout of them. A lot of this layout is dictated to us by the state. We are required to report certain numbers in order to give you, the budget committee, as much information as possible. So the first thing we talk about is an account code. For most of you in this room, you don't really care what those numbers are. Those are internal numbers for our system, so we know how to code different revenues and expenditures. But for the most part, they're just kind of there, they're window dressing. The descriptions are likely more what you care about. So they are descriptions such as beginning fund balance. They may say professional services. It may say technical services, staff pay. The descriptions are, there's a multitude of descriptions in this book. If ever any of the descriptions are confusing or too vague, please feel free to ask. We're happy to walk through what may fall in them, and I think the department heads tonight are going to walk it through some of the items that may fall into specific things that maybe just aren't very clear. That's kind of financial accounting for governments. We code things in a manner that which we call them GAAP, governmental approved accounting standards. We code them so that they make sense to a government accountant, not necessarily so they always make sense to the public eye. So again, if you have questions about any of those account descriptions, please feel free to ask. The next two columns in this workbook are the 2018 and 2019 actuals. This is what the state requires us to deliver to you so that you kind of get a general sense of how has the city done in these lines in the past. Okay. The 2020 adopted budget, that is our current fiscal year. If you'll remember, fiscal years run July 1 to June 30, and the fiscal year designator, in this case 2020, is whatever the year is when June 30 falls. So in this case, we are in fiscal year 20 currently. That adopted budget is what the council adopted, in this case last May. I think it was the last meeting in May, based on budget committee feedback. The 2021 requested budget. This budget is what the department heads requested in December when we started this process initially. It also includes our best estimates of where we thought we would land at the end of this fiscal year. So for example, the one on the screen is talking about beginning fund balance for the police department. In December, we anticipated that we would have nearly $1.8 million. That was our best guess in December based on where everything was laying, how much we'd spent, how much money we'd brought in from property taxes and other revenue streams. That was our best guess. The 2021 proposed then is what we have since set up. So usually what happens is the departments deliver their budgets to me in December. I go through them. I make adjustments in conjunction with the city manager to right size budgets or to kind of explain things differently, or if we need to move things to a different place, we make those adjustments as part of the proposed budget. In this proposed column, what you'll see this year is that these are estimates based on our projections at the end of March. So everything through the first 3 quarters of the year, we've again run our financial analysis to come up with what we anticipate we will have on hand, where we think our revenues are going to lie, where we think property taxes will land next year. We've done our best, and again, that's through the end of March. So the 2 columns, one through the end of December and one through the end of March, just a different kind of time capture. But what you'll find is, for the most part, they are the same, except for very specific lines. I will also say some of the changes between the proposed and the requested and the proposed budget include changes to healthcare figures. We do our best based on historical trend to kind of guess what the City County Insurance Services, CIS, our insurance provider, is going to give us as far as rate increases. In December, my estimate was that would be 6%. At the end of February, we go to a conference where they give us their not to exceed rates. What they anticipate they will raise rates to, and it could be less still, but they tell us this is what we will not exceed. This is our promise to you. That number that we got at that conference was 3%. So we've adjusted the budget in the proposed column to include that 3% difference. Okay. Other things have changed, such as the settlement of collective bargaining agreements, new information related to our technical services lines from our third-party IT vendor. Because while it may look like I do a lot of IT work, really we farm out a lot of that because I have a day job to do, apparently. So we have a third party that handles our technical service, our support in-house. The 2021 FTE is the number of people that we are planning to employ full-time. So FTE is full-time equivalency. We may have 23 people on staff, but we're only planning 22 and a half FTE, which means that one person is working half-time. You'll see at least one half-time position, I think, in the police department, a dispatcher. So just know that count doesn't necessarily match the number of actual people that we employ, but rather the number of people that are working full-time. The last column, fairly self-explanatory, is some notes. We've done our best to kind of go through and highlight some specific items that we think may be of importance to you, specifically on the capital asset or the capital expenditure side. We've tried to highlight if somebody's buying a vehicle, or the police department's going to talk about it later, they're working on new dispatch consoles. All of that is capital equipment. And so we've done our best to highlight that for you so you can see what those charges are. Certainly, if you have other notes that we need to add or things that we need to clarify, we will do so for future versions of this document as it goes through the process. But we'll base that kind of off of your questions as we go through this. Questions on understanding these documents before you? Okay. This I threw on the screen. You obviously have multiple samples in front of you, but I just kind of wanted to go through kind of how this is set up. We kind of group account codes based on the account type. So we have revenues, we have personnel expenses, materials and service, and capital outlay, and transfers. Those are the items that you will see, and they're all grouped. This one has total personnel costs here at the top, a list of all of the items that fall under materials and service, and at the bottom of this, you would find a subtotal for that materials and service, and all of that feeds into the bottom line to make the department expenditures. Off to the side, you can see the notes. In this case, I borrowed the library's worksheet for this example. So you can see that in the technical services line, we've included money for Evergreen, which Director Peta will talk about later. Step Up IT, our information technology service, and Microsoft 365. So we've done our best to kind of highlight those things for you. At the bottom of each of these worksheets is a lot more accounting jargon, if you will. The net gain and loss. So in this case, we're still looking at the library. based on their total expenditures and the total revenue that they hope to generate for the year, we anticipate that they will have a net gain of $449,000 for the year. That's adding to their fund balance. They are transferring out $13,000 for capital that goes into a reserve account, which we'll discuss some more later. We've budgeted for the contingency, and at the bottom, you'll see the unappropriated ending fund balance. Our goal across a majority of these funds is to have at least 6 months of fund balance available to cover unforeseen circumstances. So at the bottom, this available months of expenditure, we take the total dollars listed as the expenditure budget and divide it by 12 months, multiply by whatever we can get to. In this case, this says the library will have 12 months, a full fiscal year's worth of expenditures available at the end of the year. That is not the case 5 years from now, which we will cover. But we just wanted to kind of give you an outline of what this looks like. Subsequently, this one is community and economic development. Now, the library sits in its own fund. They get their own property tax revenue. They have kind of their own setup. Community and economic development is not necessarily so lucky. They provide their main source of revenue comes from the general fund through property taxes, through franchise fees, through the revenues that are listed in your book. This is the same setup. The structure is virtually the same, except at the bottom, you'll see this one says general fund non-departmental support. This means that in order to fund community and economic development in full, the general fund has to provide $548,000 to keep it going. That's standard. This budget falls in the general fund, and so it's all the funds kind of mesh. At the end of the year, we take everything and scoop it all into one pot, and it goes back out to be reallocated through the budget process. But that's what that means at the bottom. You won't see an available months of expenditures for this one because this community and economic development group is not that primary driver for that fund. So when we get into the budgets by fund, which I'll cover here in a second, you will see that at the bottom of each of those, we have the listed number of available months of expenditures for each one. Questions so far? Cool. All right, the last part of this, tabs 11 through 15. This is your budget by fund. So 2 years ago, maybe three years ago when I started, the city decided that they wanted to kind of outline this budget document in 2 ways. One, because the state requires us to do it one way, but also we wanted to make sure that folks understood how this budget was built. We wanted to put things together by department because a lot of times budgeting by fund for most individuals is they don't necessarily care about that. What they want to know is how much am I spending on my police department? How much am I spending on finance functions within the city? And so we've done that work. We have both of the budgets available so that you as a reader can decide which one you like the best, but we cover kind of a department by department presentation because that's what the department heads are here for, is to provide you with answers to your questions. The tabs 11 through 15 are the budget by fund requirements that the state has, and also so you have some more information at your fingertips. Okay. The last tab is tab 16. That is an outline of all of our planned positions, the salaries for those positions, and the FTE by department. It also gives you a little bit of history as far as the FTE is concerned. Presents it in a couple of different manners, gives you some options. Okay. Are there any questions about reading this budget document before we get into the numbers? Okay. All right. So if you'll all do me a favor and turn to tab 13 in your budget documents. And you're going to page 96. Okay, I'm going to cover internal service funds for you. This is not a new concept for the city. However, it was something that in its full capacity was maybe reintroduced last year as part of this budget process. So I'm going to go through it in depth. This is the point where please stop me if you have questions. We want to make sure this process is as transparent as possible. There were a lot of questions last year about this. We want you to have all the information, again, at your fingertips. We don't want to keep anything hidden at all in this process. So feel free to ask questions if you have them. So first, what are internal services? Internal services, according to the Government Finance Officers Association, their list of best practices. Internal services are those responsibilities a government provides to support its own internal operations. According to the Oregon Administrative Rules, internal services are to account for the financing of goods or services provided by one department to another department of the governmental unit on a cost reimbursement basis. As I said before, internal service funds are not new to the city of Sweet Home. This is a little snippet of the 1992 to 93 fiscal year budget that was presented to the city at that time. And it included administrative charges for state gas tax, water, wastewater, public safety levy, library levy, and the central garage. So as far back as 1993, the 1993 fiscal year, the city has been doing some form of internal service charges. It just used to be mixed into the general fund. Why did we stop? A lot of it came down to the economy. Last year, the proposal was that the internal service charges would apply to public works as they have since the dawn of this process. But we also proposed that the police and library levies would have those internal service charges as well. I couldn't tell you exactly when because I don't know that part of this history lesson, but at some time in the maybe late 90s, early 2000s, the city stopped doing the administrative charges on the police and library levies. And a lot of that came down to the property tax revenue was not there. The budget committee and the city councils of the time decided to prioritize the police and library operations over those internal service charges. That's up for each person to decide if that was a good thing or a bad thing. Me personally, I would say, yeah, the levies are there to furnish and fund the operations of those departments, first and foremost. That's what the citizens voted for those levies. But on the same token, things like the finance office are a part of those operations because all of their staff needs to be paid. Checks need to be cut. So I get funding the operations, but this is why they did not at the time. So how does this work in Sweet Home? The internal service charges cover the expenditures for the executive, finance, legislative, and public works departments. Now I say public works, that's the public works administration. So that includes the director, the engineering technician, a mechanic, things that provide overall services to all of public works. Okay. In order to recoup those charges, those expenditures, we charge various departments and they're split by the number of employees or based on total expenditures. So we have a little handout for you, except it didn't print. Let's try that again. So
Brandon, I have a question for Mr. Holly.
Sure.
When did that come back, or did it ever come back between 91 and 93 or whatever it was till now? Is that the gap between the time that we had the internal funds brought back? Or was it just last year that we brought them back?
It happened a couple times, Dave.
Yeah,
My recollection is, at that time, it wasn't called internal. Last year is the first time that I remember hearing that phrase used as a part of the budget. Before, it was simply, you know, the admin charges and where they came from.
yeah, I remember that, okay.
And I believe Davis came back twice, between mid-90s and the mid-2000s. But you're correct on the admin, wasn't
that's
titled
right, yeah.
internal.
That's what it was when I first got on the council. I think it was the admin.
This worksheet does call it administrative charges.
Okay.
A lot of this was going through now and calling it internal service charges. It's the same. The idea is the same. The mentality is the same. Kind of the verbiage has changed as governmental accounting has gone through multiple iterations of rule changes and process updates and recommendations. So now they consider them internal service charges.
So I have one more question. So in the last 5 or 6 years that I've been on the budget committee and on the council, the effects of that have been not being able to do things that we wanted to do that we couldn't do because there was no money in the general fund to cover any of that. Parks was one of the biggest things, well, one thing.
Sure.
But there's other things that it pays for rather than just being because you like the money.
So there is definitely, while there is a benefit across all of these organizations that get these service offerings, certainly the general fund benefits from the fact that these items are no longer sitting in the general fund. As Blair goes through and does his presentation later tonight, you'll hear that between his requested budget and the proposed budget, I chopped one, it's not a position, but it's a program called RARE. I cut that from his request because the general fund didn't have the funds to support it. And I also asked him to make a $15,000 reduction in his operations in order to balance the general fund. If the finance and executive departments were back in the general fund, you'll see that's an added expense that the general fund would have to figure out how to handle. And yes, it may come from parks, it may come from court, it may come from any one of those organizations. It could very well come from, those two departments, finance and executive as well. Maybe through operational reductions, staff cuts. So there is a financial benefit to not only the general fund, but all of these other areas as well.
Whoa. Which one is the council on there? You can't be cutting that.
You're in the executive.
Oh, shoot.
Anybody have other questions? Okay. Just a second. Let's see if we can get this printed.
Refresh my memory on the dispersal of those costs, how that was allocated. Was it by per person in that department, or was it by your time that's used serving that department?
So it kind of depends on the type of expenditure. So for example, payroll, the cost to do payroll is then distributed to each of the departments by the number of people in their departments, the number of people that are paid on a monthly basis. If we're looking at the city attorney, then it's based more along the lines of what your expenditures are in that given fiscal year. We spread it out based on kind of size of budget. So I'm going to print this out for you so that you all have it in front of you, and then we'll walk through it as well. Does anybody have any other questions while we're prepping this?
Mr. Chairman, Dave Hawley, 607 7th Avenue. as was pointed out, there was a lot of discussion last year about this particular fund and about the admin charges and all of that. I guess I was not not a fan, I should say, of the internal fund, but I came to accept it, as did the rest of the committee and council before we got through. To me, it made it more difficult to find what I was looking for. And it becomes a budget within a budget, so to speak. That, for instance, on the admin charges, on the expenditure side of the, and somebody gave me a copy of the budget. That might have been a mistake. Those total about 1.3 million. They come from police, library, public works, gas tax, street fund, various places. I don't remember them being that high, and there's no history number showing what it was last year. I guess my first question would be, what were those totals last year? Because as I tried to put it together, I found in the water and the wastewater fund, two separate places for admin charges of different amounts. In water, both charged back to the same account number, and wastewater back to the same account number. We talked about it a lot last year and decided to increase those admin charges. And I don't remember different sets of figures. I remember one for water and one for wastewater.
So I'll address kind of all of your questions in multiple aspects.
Oh, before I get away,
Sure.
My point in coming up here tonight was to see how it felt on this side of the table and to thank the committee for being a full committee. It's pretty doggone nice to see all of the chairs full. We had too many years of trying to scramble to get a quorum. So thank you guys for your participation. Appreciate it.
So I'll go through all of the internal service stuff, and it's going to address a lot of what Mr. Hawley was asking. You have before you I almost have it, what I'll call the calculator for how we come up with the internal service funds. This year, what we are proposing is actually less overall than what we proposed last fiscal year for the internal service charges. We have revised some of the planned expenditures for this next year. We have brought some additional revenue into that fund, which we'll cover. So we are actually asking in this proposed budget for less on the internal service side than we proposed for this current fiscal year. Okay, so we will walk through all of those. On the screen, what you have in front of you is a replication of the backside of your worksheet and the very bottom lines. This just represents the totals coming from each of these different areas and going into this internal service fund. We are proposing the internal service fund receive $1.3 million for the 2021 fiscal year from these varying areas. And we'll walk through this worksheet specifically. So on the front side, we'll start at the top. What goes into the calculation of how are these internal service reimbursements calculated? We talked about the fact that the executive and legislative budgets are included in this internal service fund. And again, in your budget worksheets, you can see this on page 90, did I say 93? Nope, 96. The city manager, the administrative assistant, and the council, the pay for all of those individuals is included in that top line, the $280,762. The materials and services budget covers the general expenses to operate the executive department. Overall, what we're asking for in the executive budget is $324,712. Those charges are then allocated based on the number of people in the departments. You can tell that because they are highlighted in blue. So the key to this worksheet is at the top. If they're divided from an HR standpoint, number of people in the department, they're going to be highlighted in blue. If it's based on expenditures specifically, so their total budgets, kind of a size of the overall, then it will be highlighted off red color. Going down the worksheet, we have a section for non-departmental, and that the non-departmental section covers expenditures that just don't really fit into a department. So we have the city attorney is one of those, as well as the services of our communications specialist. That's salary, benefits, taxes that we have to pay, all of those fund amounts. Additionally, in the communications line, there's $650 for the fiscal year for a cell phone for that individual, a city cell phone, as well as a $300 office budget to cover miscellaneous supplies that they may need. The website and meeting management line, that is equally distributed amongst all of the areas. So it is highlighted in green. I threw you for a loop, sorry. Oops. But the website and the meeting management tool is new for us this year. This is one of those things that we talked about before where we take advantage of the opportunities that are presented to us. So have a new tool that we use to build the agendas for this meeting, get all the documentation put together, the council meetings, planning commission. It's a tool that will save the city a lot of time and effort in putting those meetings together. So those costs are associated in that line. The auditing number, $40,000. For at least as long as I've been here and prior to my arrival as well, auditing charges has been $30,000. That's the contract typically that is written up by our auditors, Grove, Mueller, and Swank, out of Salem. I have added a $10,000 amount to this line, anticipating that at some point they're going to come to us and say 30,000 isn't cutting it anymore. Staff costs have risen over time. I'm sure the amount to drive out here from Salem has increased as far as gas prices, although not right now, certainly. So we are planning for that increase. One thing I want to highlight about the internal service charges is these are a cost reimbursement basis. And what that means is each month I go through and I figure out in the finance office how much money has been spent out of that internal service fund. And that's what I then put into this worksheet and run the numbers and do the transfers for. So if auditing ends up coming in at 30,000 next year, the departments will only have to pay for that 30,000. They will not have to pay for the full 40. That money will then remain in those individual departments. We take only what we need to make the fund whole. It sits at zero. It never gets interest earnings like the rest of the departments do, because the idea of this fund is purely to fund those operational services that support the operation of the city, not to make money. Ordinances is budgeted at $5,000. So every time we put an ordinance through city council and it goes through first long reading, second reading by title only, and third reading by title only, all of those have an expense that then we have to upload into a web system so that folks can access what those ordinances are and the rules governing the city of Toledo. That cost is also distributed evenly across all of the departments. Contingencies. The city has a requirement in its policy to budget in the general fund, the police department, and the library a four months worth of expenditure reserve. Additionally, we are also required to budget a contingency amount each year to handle expenses that are unforeseen. And so it kind of gives us a buffer if something happens that was not planned. In order to use that contingency amount, we have to come to council in order to have it transferred to the appropriate place. So those contingencies are there, they're budgeted, they're planned, but they cannot be accessed without council approval. The way we calculate our contingencies now is an automatic 3% of the total expense budget in each area. We also included a new, this is a couple of years old now, a 2% amount equal to, 2% of personnel costs. And the reason for that is during the year, once a year, we have things such as insurance open enrollment. Somebody may have insurance one way, and maybe they have added to their family and now their insurance is more expensive. In the past, the city used to go around and ask everybody during budget season, are you planning on changing your insurance? Some people aren't going to know that. And so what we've done is taken the total personnel budget and said, we're going to take 2% and put it in a contingency to cover instances like this. If retirements increase, if collective bargaining agreements get settled during the year that we weren't planning, maybe the full amount that got settled isn't what we were planning initially. We have some contingency to tap into in order to make sure that these departments, these funds don't overspend. So that's what's included in that contingency number. Up above the expenditures, you'll see the revenues. We bring money into this fund to help offset some of the expenses that each of these departments would then have to pay into. So we brought over last year some of our franchise fee revenue. So the money from Northwest Natural that we get, the money for our cable TV franchise, telephone and sanitation, all of that is in this fund to help offset the amounts that we would need from each department to cover our central services. This year, we have added a line for finance. Finance processes passports, if you weren't aware. And we also handle the lien docket for the city, which means that if you are selling a home and you have a lien on the property, that has to be paid off before you can sell that property. A lot of times it gets mixed into the sale of the property, but we incur charges for using that service. It is a web-based service. We were required to move to it many years ago. And so the finance department incurs expenses for that service. However, we also receive for each title search or lien search, $25 into the city's revenue lines. So we've put that into this fund because with finance being over here and those expenditures being in the internal service fund, it made sense for the revenue to follow. Last year, it not being there was an oversight. So we've added that $28,000 in revenue into this fund. Further down on the bottom of your first page is the utility billing costs. These are functions that happen in the finance office. They cover the utility billing functions for water and wastewater. As such, the police department, the library, and the general fund do not have to pay for those items. They are purely reserved for water and wastewater. That covers the cost of the full cost of the utility billing clerk who sits at the front desk. The supervisor for that position, 50% of that position is in this utility billing cost. The accounting technician who sits behind that person at the front desk, 25% of her time is dedicated to helping customers with utility billing needs. And then 10% of my salary as finance director is also dedicated to utility billing. The Springbrook maintenance that you see there, the $2,534 is only for the utility billing portal in our financial management software. So we made sure that all of those expenditures specifically related to utility billing are only billed to water and wastewater. On the backside, the rest of the finance costs. So the other 75% of the accounting technician, the other 50% of the accounting supervisor, 80% of my salary. If you'll notice, 80 plus 10% on the utility billing is only 90. The other 10% of my salary is covered by municipal court, which is in the general fund, because I also oversee that department and have some responsibilities related to that. So 80% is included in this finance costs. The materials and service budget, $69,336 covers check stock, office supplies, computer software, our accounting system is in that. The printing costs for checks and toner and things like that, the printers themselves. All of that is included in that materials and service account.
Excuse me, Brent.
Yes.
Can I ask a question? So does that 69,000 include the bank charges?
No, we will cover that briefly
Oh.
in just a few minutes.
Sorry.
Nope, that's okay. What we've done for the payroll or for the finance charges is split them out into two categories. One is payroll, because that's a core function of my office, as well as accounts payable, which is us sending money out the door to pay for the supplies that we get, the services that we get as a city, so on and so forth. So we've split this out. The payroll, the amount to run payroll, and each check is assumed that over the course of the year, we're paying $85.26. That is less than the prior year. Last year it was up over $90. Then those charges are then distributed based on number of employees in the departments. The AP is based on actual physical checks completed for each department. So we have gone through and pulled a list of all the checks we printed and or sent through electronic means, 3,361 checks last year. Of that, so many of them were for the police department, and so they're paying for just their portion of number of checks that was sent out last year. Same with the library and public works. You can see that a majority of the checks, based on the total dollars that we're proposing from public works, majority of the checks are printed for public works. That is because their budget is by far the largest budget in all of our stuff. And so rightfully so, we have taken a responsible amount from public works in this case. Bank charges. Bank charges are items that the city incurs for credit card usage. And so anytime somebody comes up to the finance counter and they say they want to pay their utility bill and they have a credit card, we incur a charge for that. You can see in the finance budget kind of what that history looks like. We are planning on $55,000 in bank charges next year. We've separated that line out of the finance budget specifically so that we could highlight that we've made some changes to how that is calculated. The police department does not take credit cards for any of their revenue generating items. They don't do credit cards in the office. They do cash and they do checks. So they don't incur bank charges. So we are not allocating any of that $55,000 out to the police department in this case. The library has a small amount, $1,857 for the year. You'll see the lion's share goes to public works, utility billing being the biggest portion of that. And then the general fund processing building permits, planning permits. If you want to go use the racquetball court, there's a fee associated with that. All of those charges processed by credit cards are then distributed to the general fund in this calculator. So total finance costs, the total amount to finance the finance department, $349,000 for next year. Public Works Administration is the next line. That is estimated to be $509,703. Again, those public works admin charges are to cover the cost of the director's salary, the administrative assistant in public works, an engineering technician, an operations supervisor, and a mechanic. Those are not allocated out to any of the other departments, just public works. And then off on the right-hand side, you can see water, wastewater, gas tax, and parks, and how those funds are then allocated out. So down at the bottom, total charges, $1,307,000. allocated out accordingly. Because we split out the bank charges specifically, the police department this next year is actually seeing a decrease in the proposed internal service charge. The library and public works and the general fund are seeing a small increase, less than the 3% for salaries and things like that. We've done our best to keep this fund as low as possible, to make sure that expenditures are appropriate, to make sure that they are not out of line, and to keep those costs as low as possible as well.
Brandon,
Yes.
on the bank charges, when somebody uses a credit card for utilities, do you guys not charge a percentage?
We do not.
To use it, like, if you're going to a gas station, they charge you.
Right.
To use a credit card.
The city has decided for as long as I know, not to charge an additional fee for credit card usage. The same thing happens we just moved municipal court to a credit card transaction service. The city decided to incorporate those charges into the general operating of municipal court. We want people to be able to use credit or debit cards if they want to, and the city decided it wasn't right to charge the consumer for that cost.
Like I mentioned last year, I personally feel the credit card charges are too high. So I'm gonna bring it back up again. I would think we need to research our options in that area. So I think they're pretty high.
Now, do you use a bank for your credit card?
It depends.
Or do you use an outside service? Because a lot of times, I own a business, several businesses in Florida. The outside services are cheaper than a regular bank.
Right. So it depends on honestly, the provider. So for example, in the finance office and utility billing, the utility billing software that we use is Springbrook. Springbrook has its own third-party credit card processor that they use. And so we incur whatever charges we use whatever charges we assume based on the usage for people paying their utility bills. In community and economic development, when somebody processes a building permit, we use a program called Acela. That's a state mandated program, so that everything for all cities is kind of seamless and the same no matter where somebody goes. And so we incur whoever that software company, that software vendor uses as their third-party credit processor. So a lot of our credit card fees are kind of outside of our hands unless we go to different software vendors. We don't necessarily get to pick those credit card processing companies.
I have a question, please.
Councilor Goble, I think.
Yeah.
Yes. So last year, we kind of beat this topic to death too, and what we decided was to not charge a finance charge for using a credit card as an incentive for the people to pay their fines and stuff to get things taken care of. I don't want to see us chasing a rabbit hole again.
And that is certainly an option, particularly on the municipal court side. It used to be, they used a service called N-Court. That service charged the customer. I don't remember the exact rate, so I won't say what it was because I don't remember. But it charged the consumer. When they called and said, I want to pay my court fine, the customer was then given an additional fee for processing with a credit card.
I agree with Councilor Goble. We should not charge those fees to the end, but I think we need to research options of different
I
providers.
used to check yearly.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, if you go to the company that you actually use right now, they don't want to lose you.
Sure.
They'll sharpen their pencil to try to give you a better rate. Even though you can still check to see if they're going to give you a better rate than
Right.
the new person, because they see that saves the city and taxpayers money. It goes toward your bottom line.
We can certainly research those. The only thing that I would caution is that because that is provided through our software vendors for Springbrook, and in fact, we just moved the library over to using the Springbrook credit card processing. We may have to look at new software in order to get a better rate for our credit card system, or take on an additional software vendor in order to process on the outside and then import that data into Springbrook. So we'll certainly look into that. We'll look at different options that are out there, but it may require us to change software vendors, and that can be costly as well.
I only wanted to say that as you're going through this, something clicked for me. I'm still not a fan of this, thing, but I see where the admin cost figure is so much higher, and it's because of the salaries for Public Works Director. All of these things were fragmented in different parts of the budget. If everyone recalls, 16% from water, 17% from wastewater, all of that. So all of this now becomes part of this budget, or this portion of the budget. And what is actually being called administrative charge is actually a salary. But the transfer is necessary to take care of it from respective funds.
And
I'm cool with that, but it is an example of, I guess, how long you can work with these things for years and still learn something new about it. And it never hurts to ask questions from anybody on these things. I do think that in Mr. Trask's questions about getting money for parks, et cetera, it might slow down those processes. It might make, some of those things a little more difficult, but this part of it, I get it.
And thank you for that, because that's a good segue into, that's the idea, that's one of the main ideas behind this internal service fund, is to consolidate expenses that were fragmented across multiple budgets. I can tell you that 2 years ago, for the 2019 fiscal year, I was taking the Public Works Director, I was distributing his salary 6 different ways. And it is very easy for that 6 percentage amount distribution to get lost amongst all of the other charges in these departments. So what this does is it brings everything into one place. It makes it clear, concise. We're trying to be, again, as transparent as we possibly can be with all of this information. It's in one place for somebody to look and find, oh, I want to know how much we pay public works staff. Here it is.
So on that note, why is the Public Works Administration separated out from the other administrative costs or not captured within that budget?
We separated that out so that it was, then we could make sure that we demonstrated that amount for public works is only being charged to public works funds. So it wouldn't be appropriate for us to say the police department needs to pay for a portion of Director Springman's salary, because Director Springman doesn't have any police department functions. He does not carry a taser. He does not ride around in a police car, as much as maybe he wished he did. But the idea is to highlight that those charges for public works are specifically being dedicated to public works. We're only recouping money from those public works funds.
Can you show that how that those cells are blank?
Yeah. So on this chart here, the public works admin, this section here for the police department is blank for the public works admin. The same with the library. There is an amount here for public works because they're the ones who has to pay for that, and the general fund doesn't have any component of that. If we come over to the right-hand side, then we start to see it, we start to see it based, split out to each of those public works areas: water, wastewater, streets, and parks. Those 4 divisions underneath public works. Does that answer your question, Councilor Crowley?
I was just wondering why it was just the one. I see that where it goes across to what it is, but if you're going to put one administrator down in this document, are they all there at some point for their departments? So it was just an observation.
Sure. And we, we certainly could move that up into the executive space, but again, the idea is to try and, if you looked at that page 96 in your documents, actually, if you turn to page 98, nope, yeah, 98. And you look kind of toward the top, there's a bold line that says 003 executive expense, 324,000, the proposed budget for total executive expense is $324,712. Then the idea is you'd be able to trace that number to the spreadsheet. So we want people to be able to tie the numbers together if they're looking for, how did you come up with this? Subsequently, page 99 includes the public works expense.
Brandon,
Yes.
perhaps we could make a note in the future to, along the left side, insert like where you could find those. So like page 99, or if that makes sense.
Could certainly do that.
Yeah.
And we can make sure that happens in future iterations. So once we're done with this process with the budget committee, and once the budget committee has signed off and approved a budget, I produce another one of these books that then goes to council for review. So we'll make sure we incorporate something there so that it's easier to find and understand. Any other questions I can answer about this?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
So I'm a little confused on the materials and services. I already told you I was going to ask about that. So on this sheet right here, you show 69,336 under finance, right? Right?
Yep.
But in the book, under finance, it shows 166,000. So would you explain the $100,000 difference for me, please?
Sure. So if you're looking in your book at page 98, part of that difference is, if you see there, the second line of the materials and services group is auditing. There's that $40,000 auditing charge. That's where a portion of that money is. And again, a lot of what we've done is work to break out kind of major costs so that they can be found and seen by folks when they're looking at this document. So the auditing expense is one. The bank expenses, 55,000 is the other.
No. Okay.
Mhm. Other question?
Did you have in the beginning, is that a question coming in where people were getting away?
No, there was not. Okay, so for the now second point of Mr. Hawley's question regarding how do you find these items? What we have done this year to make it very clear how this worked is we have moved these internal service charges into the materials and service budget in each of these areas. They are charges for service. So this is a snapshot of the police department budget. We've set up two lines to try to make it easier for folks to take this spreadsheet that we gave you today and trace those numbers back through the budget document. The first one, administrative charges for service, 129,260 in the case of the police department. And then there's another line for finance charges for service of nearly 45,000. And if you went through this spreadsheet and looked at the finance costs, so on the back side, it says total finance costs down here toward the bottom, 349,000. But if you look at the police department, The total finance amount is $44,996. And that's what you see right there on their spreadsheet. So we've tried to make this very transparent so everybody understands where they came from. Yes, last year they came from a different place. You can still see the history in those spreadsheets. There's a line down toward the bottom of each of those that says transfers out for service. That is where we had those internal service charges for this current fiscal year. Before this current fiscal year, it didn't exist for the police department and the library, but Public Works had those transfers out for service. So you will see that in their budgets. So the history is there. We're just trying to make it clean and concise and transparent for everybody who wants to look at this. Questions?
I will say that telling us about the reimbursement makes a whole lot more sense. We didn't know that last year. At least, maybe I was sleeping in the conversation, but that makes a whole lot more sense to me. So if they don't need it, if you don't need it, you don't take it.
Correct. I can tell you that this year to date, we have not taken everything that we thought we would take. So through the end of March, you would figure that we would take 75%. We're actually in the upper 60% range of what we have taken. So we are today, that is the practice. If we don't need it, we are not taking it.
And the auditing comes before council for approval.
Correct.
Goes up.
Yeah, the audit contract will be before council, before it's approved. Sure.
Yes.
And I think that's one thing I would just like to point out about how we function in City Hall is kind of going back to Mr. Hawley's comment. You'll probably never, maybe next year, we'll take a break and give it the same, but we always try and take the feedback that we get from the council, from the budget committee, or even from the community and implement those suggestions anytime we can in an effort to improve. So what we're trying to make improvements to make things more transparent, easier to follow in everything that we do, and that includes in the budget. And sometimes when you've been doing something the same way for a long time, that can certainly create some confusion. But we hope to get to a place where the new normal is less confusing, I guess, if that makes sense. So, last year during this process, there was feedback. We made changes between budget meetings, if you recall that on this fund, because that was the feedback. That's what people wanted. It's what the budget committee wanted, it's what the council wanted, and it's what the community wanted. So we made those changes. Coming back this year, we've tried to make changes based on feedback we've gotten to make things easier to find and easier to follow. So we strive to do that in everything we do, and we'll continue to do that in all of our budgets. It's just trying to make them as, municipal budgeting is not as straightforward as your home budget by any means. And that's laid out for you by the gaps, but it's laid out by the state, and we just have to play the game by the rules that are given to us. So we do the best we can to clear it up, and sometimes when you make a change, unfortunately, it muddies the water a little bit before it actually settles again. So
when it clicked for me was when I put together the Public Works Administration cost with the fragmented salaries that we used to see. To me, this is a salary. It's not an admin cost. You're not charging him to do something for him. You're paying him wage, but that's what we call it. And as long as we understand that, then why?
Well, I would like to state, to your improvement, 16 tabs is a whole lot better than 24 tabs. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. I purposely bought smaller tabs. Smaller tab number.
And on that point, Mr. Hawley, when I first got on the budget committee and you had to find the Public Works money that paid to the Public Works Director, you go to page 14, and then you go to page 199, and you go back to 24, and then you go back to 100. It was horrible, horrible. 16% here, 5% there, 10% there. It was horrible, horrible. I hate to say that he did it.
Well, the guy said he's done a lot on the problem solving for there. I present it and he solves it.
We present it and you just do whatever.
Pass the buck.
Are there any last questions about anything I have presented up to this point? Because from here on out, you don't necessarily have to listen to me speak.
Yes, I mean,
I'll take 5 minutes.
oh.
We'll take a 5-minute break and then come back and answer questions.
So we're trying to, the live cast lags to people out. And it can be up to 30 seconds. So we want to give people the opportunity to hear everything we say, type in their question or call. And so we want to give them a 5-minute window to be able to get their questions into it.
I thought you were doing commercials.
That's another revenue source.
There we go.
I think the law is 15 minutes. I think it could-
Are there any questions about the material that Brandon's presented for us? Okay. We will call on Director Peter.
Actually, Chief Lynn's gonna go first.
Hey, I'm so sorry.
That's quite all right. If you want Rose first, I'm fine. Rose might be more entertaining than me. You just never know. I hear she has the dance coming up. First of all, there may be a few who don't know me. I'm Jeff Lynn. I'm the chief here at the Sweet Home Police Department. I've been with the city 21 years now and been the chief for 7. So one thing I want to say is I really appreciate everybody being here, showing up. I'm always, every year, I'm kind of impressed with all of you who volunteer your time and donate it for, because that, no offense to the finance director, but sometimes it's not the most riveting discussions. It doesn't keep us all on the edge of our seats, so I do appreciate everybody for showing up. And as you know, I'm here to present the police department budget. And so it's the proposed budget. And before we really get into it, I'm going to just take a couple minutes to explain kind of where we're at and where we came from over the last series of budgets. Basically, over the last couple budgets, we've played catch up to where we had been. We, in basically 2013 through 2016, 17-ish, so there were some lean times for the police department. And so we were extremely fiscally conservative during that. And as we did that, and it was out of necessity, and as we did some of that, some of our equipment, whether it's the fleet or some of our software programs, they lagged behind. They entered their end of life cycle. And so over the last few years, we've been fortunate enough to have the revenue that we've been able to catch up to all of our services, create a much more efficient department and a much more modern department. And we'll kind of go through a couple of some of the improvements we were able to make the last couple of years were our mobile and portable radios that both the officers carry on their person and that are in our vehicles. In the end of 2018, I believe it was, they were at their end of life. And so the Motorola, the company that we were with, would not even support them anymore. So we had to look at upgrading, and that's not a small feat for an agency our size, is to find the funding to be able to do that. We did that. We have an extremely modern radio system now. We are on a dual band system, which is both VHF and 700-800 megahertz. And so we're able to communicate with a number of different agencies. Included with that, our fleet, we have really upgraded our fleet over the last, since 2017 on. We have a very modern fleet now. And in fact, in this, we're not proposing an increase in our patrol vehicle fleet. In our capital outlay, we are going to have a proposal for partially funding a new K9 vehicle, and we'll get into that in the capital outlay. One of the other things over the years, we've been able to set aside enough money that it was in our last year's budget to upgrade our dispatch center. For those who don't know, we have a 24/7 police department. We have officers out day and night, a minimum of 2 on at all times. But we also have a dispatch center in our police department. Our city does our own dispatching for us. We're a secondary dispatch center. And so what that means is any 911 calls actually go into Lynn County and they're shipped back to our call center, and we dispatch our own personnel for the police side. It does a number of things for us. It gives us local control over our dispatch. But I think really one of the key factors is having our own dispatch center keeps our doors open to our police department 24/7. You can go to that police department anytime, walk in the lobby, even in the COVID-19 days, our lobby still remains open. Citizens can go in if they're in need, the doors are open, and they can go in and see a live person in our department. And I think that's always been huge, and I think that's one of the things that the council and the community has really wanted and been supportive of. So with that, our building's 20 years old. And so our dispatch equipment that is all in that, their consoles are 20 years old. And think of some of the cars that you have that are 20 years old. It is beyond its lifespan. And so we were fortunate enough that an estate had left a chunk of money, $63,000, that we have directed towards upgrades to our dispatch center. We'd actually included it in the budget last year, so it was an approved project for a capital outlay last year. And we had been going through this current fiscal year, selecting the program we want to go with, the equipment and the software that we want to use. And then lo and behold, March happened, or we started seeing some rumblings of March happened, and really we just put a freeze on that project. And so money hasn't been spent. The money is going to roll forward into this fiscal year, but in our the budget proposal is again doing the dispatch upgrades that we will talk about in the capital outlay portion. And there's been other products that we've improved on, from the mobile data terminals in the police vehicles that allow the officers more access to information while they're in their vehicles. Those are all things that over the last several years we've been able to upgrade and improve. And so that's when I say we've been playing catch up. We have, and we're finally really there. So that's kind of in a nutshell of where we are and where we came from. There's some who are new here, maybe not that familiar with our department. We again, like I said, we're 24/7. We have minimum two officers on at all times. We really strive for that. It's for the community's safety as well as the officer's safety as well. In this budget right now that we're talking about, it is for a 21.5 full-time equivalent employees. Okay. Now that is down a half of basically a 0.5 equivalent employee last year. It's not a direct one-to-one correlation that we'll talk about in just a second. Currently, we've had a recent retirement within our department, and it was not that recent anymore, 5 months ago. But we're also projecting 2 retirements at the end of this year. And so one of those retirements we anticipate going to be a dispatcher, and one of those retirements we anticipate is going to be one of our sergeants. And so we are trying to gear up and project where our staffing will be on how we're going to fill that and maintain our staffing levels. And so we're projecting on somewhat of a slight reorganization within our department, and that'll be reflected in this proposed budget. Typically what I do, and we can do it, any questions you have, feel free to ask. We can talk about revenues. I know the Finance Director will assist with any of the revenues. As you all know, there is a substantial, I have substantial concerns over the our economy and where our economy is going in the COVID. Everybody does. We see it every day. It's everywhere on the TV and any type of news media. That's all they're talking about, and rightfully so. I don't think I haven't seen an economic forecast that's near the same across the board. You name it, they've thrown that out as a forecast. And so this budget before you is fairly conservative from personnel standpoint, so that we hopefully can remain nimble enough to address and face any type of economic difficulties that our community continues to face that trickles into our levy aspect. So as we're moving into that is some of the what's built into the budget. What I'll do is kind of run down some of the changes that I think are warranted for some discussion in our materials and services. And then what a lot of interest usually comes up looking for the last year's compared to this year's and what some changes are. I will point out not all the changes are my fault. I have to point to a finance director for that as well, because it seems like for the last couple of years, he changes where he wants things put in the different budget. And so you'll see changes and it's the actual expenses are the same. They're just broken up into different line items now. And so I blame him for all of that. But anyway, questions right off the bat on where we stand at our staffing levels, where we think we're moving forward. Like I said, the two potential retirements are giving us a chance to relook at things on how we're going to restructure come towards the end of the year.
Mr. Chairman, I have a Jeff, are any of them going to hire back?
Well, that's one has expressed a moderate interest in that. Whether that comes to fruition or not, I don't know. We really haven't even sat down and discussed that. I'm not even sure that that employee would really be interested in coming back.
Okay.
Real quick for the committee's information, tab 9 is the police department, in case you have not found it yet.
So for those, again, staffing is always a big thing. About 77% of our budget is personnel expenses. So staffing, people in the chairs, boots on the ground really are where the money that we get from the levy goes to. So, we're currently broken up with, obviously me, you pay me. And then we have 4 sergeants. And about 2 years ago, we were able to actually expand our level of supervision and bring two additional sergeants on, which gives us much more 24/7 coverage for that risk management aspect of it. So we have myself, 4 sergeants who are the supervisors, 10 police officers that are broken down into 8 patrol officers, 1 detective, and 1 school resource officer. We have a communications supervisor and my administrative assistant all in one. 4 dispatchers, a half-time, a part-time, 0.5 dispatcher, 1 community service officer / evidence tech, for a total of 21.5 FTE positions in this proposed budget. Again.
Excuse me, Jeff, I
Yeah.
have a question. So under the income, the school district is there, but there's no money. Is that saying that the school district is not going to contribute towards a resource officer?
No, it's not. I actually had talked with the superintendent last week, and they're going through some
Yes.
budgeting issues as well. But the superintendent assured me that
I was gonna let you finish.
they are still planning on funding the school resource officer at that halftime position.
Thank you.
This is one of those moments that Jeff just blamed me for recently, which was that I moved things around. This is one of those examples. So what we've done is taken that revenue and offset the expenditure that's associated with that. So that the dollars that we receive from the school district are now being put into the line that's labeled staff pay on page 54. So it goes to offset the staff pay by that 40, I think it's 48,000 or something like that. So that's where we put that.
Oh, okay.
So I have a question. We had decided that the marijuana tax revenue would go to the police department, right?
Yes.
And on page 54, it says marijuana tax 2018, 6,000. And 2019, nothing. Then it jumps up to 2020, 27,000. then jumps up to requested 182,000. But if you turn back to page 35, for the marijuana local option tax, on 2018, it says over 39,000. On 2019, 71,000. And then to 2020, it doesn't say anything. So why is that?
So in fiscal years 2018 and 2019, the marijuana tax was split into two components. One was the amount collected within the city. That amount went to the police department. The amount that we got in state shared revenues, so across the entire state of Oregon, total dollars received for marijuana sales, then split amongst the cities and counties, that amount was was placed in the general fund. This budget corrects that. This budget says that all of the dollars, whether it's state shared revenue or local tax receipts, will stay with the police department. The big jump is because we did not really know what marijuana tax receipts were going to look like. So in 2020, we anticipated that we would only receive $27,400 in marijuana taxes. To date, we have received over $135,000 in marijuana tax revenue.
So did the police department receive anything in 2019?
No, according to this, they did not.
I thought they were supposed to have though.
I would have to go back. I don't know why that was the case.
Okay.
So we already went through one quarter and we don't have any money in there from 2019.
We are currently in fiscal year 2020. We're in the middle of fiscal year 2020.
Okay, I got that, but.
Yeah, but it's in 2019.
Right.
There's nothing listed, but we had allocated that it would go to the police department.
So I'll have to check and see what happened with revenues there. I could make something up,
Oh,
but
you
that's
get
not
the
right.
big bucks, and then we got one number. And then you get this number over here, that's a ridiculous number for me, but that's crazy, that's good, that's good. I have that written down right here. What are you doing?
That's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money.
It's almost scary. It's a lot of money. It's almost scary.
Yes,
We went through and calculated what that looked like then as far as total volume within Sweet Home City limits. And it's a lot.
I don't think you want to tell them.
I don't.
well, I think, I don't know, do you think it's possibly because of this COVID thing?
This was pre-COVID.
Yeah, I would say so.
Pre-COVID, so I couldn't tell you what it looks like after COVID because they were set up as a essential
Might even
business.
double
What are you looking for?
because it comes in.
You know that right there.
I could open it.
That's all right. That's all right.
People not passing a urine.
We've already got 136.
They don't have to go to work.
What did our mask come out to, like $9 per household or $3 per?
Yeah, but really, it's a large number that I never anticipated, and so somewhat of a windfall for the police department, but there's got to be some social concerns that come along with that as well.
So, Mr. Chairman, so Jeff, what do you use that for? Is it just for the narcotics thing that for research and for hire?
Currently, because this is really the first year that, or the first substantial amounts we've been getting, it's not broke out to anything specific. It goes right into the revenue funds of the department and it goes pulled into the operating aspect of it.
Okay.
Something to be considered in the future. It's a substantial amount of money, and what's an appropriate use for it right now is just going into the revenue fund.
If it continues to grow like that, we should probably consider part of it going to the courts.
Possibly in courts, but I mean, also potentially could go into expanding the K-9.
Yeah,
that's what I thought.
Yeah, and there's different options that it definitely can. I think it's relatively new. Right now, it's just into our operating funds and helping us with that carryover that we have at the end of the years.
Well, one more. So this will be the last one on that particular thing. So, what have you used it before, or have you even used it for anything specific?
Nothing specific. It's just gone to the revenue, but it's such a new revenue stream.
It's flowing.
It's flowing.
It's just, it is something to consider in the future as we move forward. Really, I thought the first payment was like an anomaly. Somebody screwed up.
Hey, Brandon, don't tell him what he's getting.
Noted.
So really, if everybody wants to turn to page 55, really, I thought we'd go down through some of the materials and services, specifically point out some of the changes that are in there. Again, not all my changes. Thank you, Brandon.
I'm gonna hear that a lot.
And again, if you have questions on what make up any of these line items, let me know. I have a list here that kind of explains, and we walk down through them. One of the first that I thought we'd talk about is our building repair and maintenance. You haven't seen that really in the past, and that is renaming or putting items that we have had under, whether it's operating expenses, into its own line item now. And those expenses were like our fire sprinkler maintenance, our fire sprinkler inspection, our generator maintenance and inspections, our fire alarm, electrical repair and maintenance, those type of things we lumped under its own line item now, building repair and maintenance. So that's kind of a new item that you'll see. The next, what I would call significant changes, and if you want to point out anything else, perfectly fine. Operating supplies has took a significant decrease, and that is simply we pulled out our fuel, our gas, our patrol fleet fuel from there. It had always been listed under operating supplies. It now has its own line item, so that's why there was a significant reduction in that.
Insurance,
Sorry, what?
insurance, quite a jump there.
This is another blame Brandon moment. So as part of last year's process related to the internal service funds, part of the conversation was, are there items that we could bill directly to the departments instead of having these relatively astronomical insurance charges? And then appropriately, then each department is only paying for their specific insurance. So we have split out the insurance costs that we receive from CIS to each of the individual areas. So Jeff's insurance number includes the amount of insurance costs for his vehicles and his building.
Mr. Chairman, once again, some of these folks in this room might not know what CIS is, and so I would appreciate it if you would tell us what that.
CIS is City County Insurance Services. They provide
all of those.
Right. They provide insurance for, they provide our health benefits, short-term disability, property and casualty insurance, as well as provide some pre-loss support. So that's specifically personnel related if we need to go through the motions for either discipline or termination or whatever it may be, they provide that support as well. So 90, I think they say 96% of the cities and counties in the state of Oregon utilize CIS for their insurance provider. We are one of them.
So what's going on with utilities?
They're all broken down now into their own line items. So from the gas and fuel to our cable, and they all have their own line item now, to where they had been just lumped under a one line item, utility line item.
Okay.
It's another Brandon.
Something tells me you're going to hear that a lot.
Just let me explain this whole thing.
Jeff,
Yes.
I would like to know what professional services.
Yes. Professional services, one of the first line items. A lot has to do with services that we get that basically from somebody who can only provide that service. The psychological services that the police officers get, the services we utilize through occupational health and medicine. Those are like the yearly hearing tests, the urine tests, the officer, our whole department is on random UAs, quarterly where they do UAs that are random samples. From hearing tests, our towing services, notary fees, the medical examiner program that we pay into comes out of the professional service line. And those are, in essence, the line items. We had paid some legal fees out of there too at different times.
It's a $16,000 increase.
Mm-hmm. I think the tools and small equipment, that'll jump out to you probably. It had been next to nothing actually. And now it's at just over $24,000. That's pretty much Brandon's fault as well. We've moved out a number of items that were typically, we would list under some capital outlay items. Those items, we usually budget for some vehicle equipment. And that's typically, we try to throw some money in the budget in case something in the vehicle goes out. Specifically, we've utilized it in the past for if a radar unit goes out in the vehicle and it can't be fixed, it gives us some leeway to replace some of that. We also budget to replace a series of duty weapons in the event that we need different duty weapons. God forbid there's an officer involved shooting and 3 officers involved, their weapons get placed into evidence. And so we'd have to replace those with something. We budget to replace a series of our body-worn video cameras that the officers wear. We budget to replace 2 tasers a year because they have a life expectancy of themselves. The difference in here is that we have 3 items that haven't been in previous budgets. And those 3 items, with our upgrade in our mobile data terminals that are in our vehicles, we have proposed to move towards e-citations, which were in the officer, if they were to issue a traffic citation, it's all digitally done. A copy would be printed out for the driver, for the violator. But the biggest benefit of that is that it would connect with the court software. So there would be less data entry. It would be, but that all comes at a cost. That cost is, we anticipate about $6,000 for the printers for that, for the vehicles. We've also have in here additional funds to place 3 additional surveillance cameras around our police facility. I don't want to tell everybody, there's certain portions of our facility that we don't have cameras on them. And so those are things we would like to remedy. And then what else? And then camera systems for the patrol cars. Currently, we have body-worn video cameras that I think are fantastic, and I'd hate to see us ever go without those. But we also lose some when we don't have our patrol vehicles, don't have the videos on the cars themselves, and the cost is coming down. I think it's fairly reasonable anymore. And one of the quotes, for $6,000, we could equip our patrol vehicles with cameras. And I just think it's, if just a proposal, I think it would be money well spent. So that's where the tools and small equipment, why there's changes in there. Any other questions on materials and services?
Not a serious question. Do you surplus your tasers when you're done with them?
No, we destroy them. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for asking.
Ray, it's always fun. So if there's no questions, I do want to cover the revenue piece because there's some significant changes to the revenue that this committee will need to approve.
I do have a few questions. So years back, Jeff, you were looking for a new patrol car, then new phone system, consoles in the car. The other one was dispatch. You were tired of going through Albany or wherever you went through. Did you ever look any farther into that?
As far as
Dispatching straight from here?
I'm not sure. Are you talking upgrading our dispatch equipment, or are you talking about partnering with other agencies for dispatch services?
I thought we already were partnering.
No, we're not. We're our own standalone dispatch center. And in 2017, we had reached out because there were really to find out what would it cost if we were to pay somebody else to dispatch for us. Is there a significant cost savings with having somebody else provide that service for us? What we found out is that most don't have the capacity to assume us. So that was again 17, 18-ish. They didn't have the capacity to take us over, nor did they have the will to take us over. And then the one that was interested, I'm not sure they would have been able to provide the service, and it was actually going to cost us more than what we were actually paying our own people to do it. And then again, we lose that lobby being open 24/7. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just thought that at one time you said there was a lag between dispatchers from city to city, and you thought that they would be better suited if we had a quicker system, faster system. Maybe I'm wrong in that.
I don't recall the conversation, but yeah, okay.
It was around there.
I want to go back to radios.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to one of the officers the other day, I can't remember his name. And he said that the battery life is not what it could or should be. And he said you bought the best batteries they had. Are they going out of service before they're off of, you know what I mean? Because they say that they won't last the whole shift or something.
They won't last any over the shift. Our officers run, the patrol officers run 12-hour shifts. And so at the end of that 12 hours, the radio is dead. And so that's the best battery Kenwood had. And so what Kenwood has done is provided all the officers with an additional battery. So they have it charging, and at some point during their shift, they should just switch out and change. But yeah, that was a concern when we got them.
Is there any way that they could charge them like they do? I don't want to get to the fire engine, but we on the engines, we have places to plug in radios and charge them all the time. I just wondered if there was something.
Yeah, and each there's charging docks in the patrol riding room. And so each, like I said, each officer has an extra battery, and there's usually a couple extras sitting around as well. So
I'm just thinking of the safety.
I get it, yeah.
So, okay, good, I'm good.
And in future years, so this year, you're looking for the patrol car and the consoles, correct? Or trying to get those done?
Yes, I haven't got to the capital outlays yet, but yes, right on you were on the line. I don't know if.
In the future.
Yes.
Do you see anything else big that you're going to need?
Do you want to jump into capital outlay right now, or do you want to go to your?
No, you do yours. I'll do mine after.
Okay. Capital outlay. Well, what a great segue into my capital outlay aspect is we had a series of things listed, and you'll look at on our budget, and it shows 137% increase in our capital outlay. And this is what it's basically broken down into. We had, as I mentioned, our dispatch upgrades had been approved last budget cycle, but we put a pause on that. And so again, that same proposal is moving forward into this current fiscal budget proposal. And the estimates are right at 125,000. And again, I think I've explained some of it before. We just have old equipment. It's 20 years old. Everything's IP based right now. And what we have is not IP, it's just mechanical based, and it is time to upgrade that. Are we still functioning? Absolutely. We can still function. The one thing that I worry about is what we have now is an extremely robust system. I mean, it's lasted 20 years with little to no problems, and then we're moving to IP based, and so we're bound to have some hiccups, but it is time to replace our dispatch system. And I mentioned the donation that came in. Arlene Moody, for those of you who have been around enough, Arlene Moody, her estate left the department $63,000. And Arlene was one of the matrons at Sweet Home in 1953. And so we're using the funds that she left us to to help offset that, the upgrades to our dispatch center if it gets approved. So I think it's really cool. So yes, the dispatch upgrades, we do have 20,000 in here for a vehicle upfit. Our K9 program started a couple years ago. When we started it, the officer was extremely resourceful in how she obtained all of what she has. And with that, she was able to get Deschutes County Sheriff's Office to donate a fully equipped K9 vehicle. It was a 2013 Chevy Tahoe that they were pulling out of service. And so they donated it to our agency so we could start our program. That vehicle's got 128,000 miles on it now. First, when we started rolling out the K9 program, a little hesitant on my part, do we need this? It has really been a great addition to our department and the investigations that it allows us to do. We haven't had the capability since then. Currently, as of yesterday, we had 2 vehicles that were seized in the back of our lot because the K9 alerted on those vehicles and officers were writing search warrants on those vehicles. So it is just we're still learning how to use Gemma, really. But at some point we need to think about upgrading her vehicle. Again, the officer's resourceful. She has also applied for a grant to try to offset the cost of a new K9 vehicle through the USDA Rural Development Grant, I believe it is. And so we have our fingers crossed for that. But the 20,000 would pay for the upgrade, the upfit for that vehicle, because it takes special equipment to put into a K9 vehicle, because there's a lot of sensors, heat sensors that go into it, to where if the temperature goes up so far, the AC kicks on. If it continues to go up, the windows roll down. If it continues to go up, the doors pop open so the dog can get out. So a lot of safety features built in. Those come at cost. Also in our capital outlay proposal is some upgrades to our jail audio system. We haven't upgraded our audio system in our jail for probably 10 years. And as we move forward with continuing to house people at different times for 4 or 5 hours, we need to be able to monitor them effectively and efficiently, because the risk associated with putting somebody in those cells is incredible. And so it's just one of those things that we need to do at some point, is to upgrade our audio systems so that dispatchers can monitor them effectively. We also have $10,000 in the capital outlay proposal for tech upgrades in our training room in the court. So we can move to things that would make the judge happy, attorneys happy, defense attorneys happy, and improve our training capabilities there as well. And last but not least, we have, as I mentioned, our building's 20 years old, and we have in here $100,000 for HVAC systems. Currently, there are 5 HVAC systems on top of our building, and we were told by the contractor, our HVAC contractor, that one of those needs to be replaced this next year. And that cost of that is anywhere from $45,000 to $60,000. And so we need to look at doing that. Again, hate to say it, 20 years, I'm pretty impressed that we've made it that long without having to replace one. Because typically government buildings, you're not going the highest quality equipment to put on top of the building. So we have put in $100,000. So we have some buffer room in case the 2 go down. We don't plan on replacing 2. We plan on looking at replacing that 1 if that's what needs to happen, but not just replacing 2 until we have to. Any of that additional would be pushed forward into the next year's what's the line item? What's it called? Fund balance. Yes. And that is the capital outlay aspect of it.
You say is dash cams anywhere in this at all? Possibly?
We are dash cams for their patrol vehicles.
Yeah.
That is under the tools and.
Under the tools.
Under the tools, yes. That's where that's listed at.
Was that his idea? Yeah. Okay.
For the record, it was the auditor's recommendation.
I have a question.
Yes.
On that same page, it says special events, $12,000.
Yes.
What is that?
We have a couple events that we run. Most are our kid programs, you know, in specifically the holiday seasons. We do our Shop at the Copy event that we pay for kids to be involved in. We also do the sharing tree. When not all the tags get picked up, we pay for. We do some back to school events where we will, if certain kids meet a criteria, we take them out and basically get them some clothes to help them go back to school. All those funds that are listed here are donated funds from the community. So those come in from the community to support those programs, so they don't come out of the levy funds. We keep we track those separately so we know exactly what we have. And I think this year we have about 12,000 in there, give or take. And so we usually put that all down as an expenditure.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Postage. You have
Yes.
almost 3 times the amount for next year.
Yeah, and actually I had a discussion today with the dispatch supervisor, my administrative assistant. She's estimating that we're doing about $600 a quarter in postage and shipping. Not everything's email still, you know, we're still not there. Most cases, tickets, citations, anything that's going out to other courts are mailed. We still ship quite a few items. There's some that items get shipped, like some evidence items get shipped to crime labs in different places. We've had to use crime labs in out of state to run certain aspects. So that's where the $2,600 comes from. And we've actually been trying to just come up with a much more accurate figure of what we've been spending. But that's the estimate is about $600 a quarter.
I have also a question on your courts.
Yeah.
I came from a state and city that most of our small cities didn't have courts.
Mm-hmm.
We used the county. So my question is, do you make a lot of money each, because I see it looks like every city here in Oregon almost has their own court system, you know, even though the bigger would probably have to go to the county.
I don't think court is a moneymaker. We have a whole different section on the courts, a whole different. So what I would say is most municipalities, if they have a local police department, have some form of municipal court to run their crimes, their traffic violations through. Years past, we've talked about moving towards justice court, which is more of a county-based court system. At the time when we had talked about that, the judges at the justice court were not that interested in assuming it. They were more than willing to assume the violation, like the traffic tickets, because there's some revenue that there's more of a consistent revenue stream there. However, the criminal aspects, it's not necessarily a revenue stream. It's more of it's a money-losing proposition typically, and so that discussion really hasn't taken place in any time, really, since I've been the chief. But I know that the finance director also oversees and supervises the municipal court, and his budget's coming up. I'm not sure when, but definitely have some of those discussions. But I don't think they cover. I think it's a money-losing proposition any way you look at it. So it's just a necessary evil.
We'll cover municipal courts during the May 14th meeting, but we generate as far as revenue is concerned, 170,000. We do spend more than that in personnel and materials and services. So we'll cover all of that when we do the finance presentation next week.
I got a couple things. And on line 432, the grounds maintenance in 19, it was $8.99. I suggest we go back to that and use them forever. You know, put them on a contract. Who does that now? Public Works?
Public Works does much of our ground maintenance, but also Sunshine. Public Works does our exterior. Sunshine Industries does our interior. But up until COVID.
And I have one comment that I want to make, and it's on travel and training. I am always happy to see our training money go up, because I think that a lot of times in the past, we haven't had money to do that. And I hope we use it all.
And I agree. And we've had several trainings that we try to host here as well. In fact, at the end of this month, we have one scheduled, which is a field training and evaluation program. It's a week-long class. They haven't made a final decision because it's a regional training that's hosted by the Department of Public Safety and Training. I'm going to say it gets canceled. They just haven't made the official announcement. So we try to bring a varied approach to training and still offer individuals to go out and get some experience that we may not be able to just offer them in the house.
And I have one more comment. If we don't get the grant for the K-9 vehicle, we need to make that work. We need to make that work. If we don't get the grant, we need to make that up somehow so we can get that car.
Well, yeah, and really one of the things we've tried, and we've all sat around the table and we have these discussions on what's the economy going to look like. And really, I don't think anybody knows. And that's why we're trying to be as conservative as we feel we can, set us up for future success, but we'll keep on what we've got. So I agree with you.
And we've been pretty blessed the last year, and this year's pretty good too. So it's been amazing, actually. So anyway.
I have to wait and see what happens to the marijuana revenue.
Yeah, this quarter could be quite the boost.
What was that?
This quarter could be quite the boost.
I think so.
I could pay for the van for sure.
Out of training, Jeff, just as a curiosity, do we still have that simulator?
Yes, we do.
I think that's a very good tool.
It is, yep. And we still utilize it. Especially, we utilize it more when new officers come on.
Cool.
I think you have a video question. It just popped up.
Jared had a question, I thought.
Oh, no, I was just moving screens around. Oh, Garrett, did you have a question?
I didn't have a question.
Do you have, want to talk about revenue?
Yeah, I'll talk about it relatively briefly, so that we can move through the rest of the presentations. Property taxes is really kind of what we want to talk about primarily here. For the police department, and for this discussion, I'll have you turn to page 76 in your budget document. It's behind tab 11. What we want to highlight here is kind of in keeping with, I guess, a statement or almost a promise that the city made that if we don't need to take all of either levy, the public safety levy or the library services levy, then we would try not to. In this coming fiscal year, what we have proposed is not taking the full public safety levy. We are proposing to take 30 cents off of that levy. So we would take, the levy would be $7.55 per $1,000 of assessed value. The goal of all of our funds, as I mentioned before, is to maintain a fund balance that meets 5 to 6 months. The police department, we feel, given kind of the economic picture as it stands currently, given kind of their future budget, their forecasted budget, which you can see on the page that I had to turn to, we believe that if we take the 30 cents less right now, we can weather that. Part of the consideration is twofold. We don't know what the economy is going to do next year. We do actually anticipate the real market values, and we had this conversation last time, real market value will kind of peak and just level off. That means we won't see any change in compression. We anticipate the same level of compression that we have currently, which means the police department isn't going to generate additional revenue as it is with its current levy. We also anticipate in this budget, we have built in a lower collection rate than the city is used to. And some of that is we're not sure exactly what the deferral of mortgage payments and subsequently escrow payments is going to do for our property tax receipts. And so we have budgeted for kind of a downturn in actual property tax receipts that we get from individuals. So we're trying to mitigate a financial issue for households while at the same time being cognizant of making sure that 5 years from now, we can still maintain the same level of service that we have. And so that's what we've done with the police department. Our proposal is taking $7.55 per thousand for that levy rate, saving that 30 cents, which is about a $230,000 savings across the city for homeowners and businesses as well. That's built into this budget. On the library side, we are still proposing that we take the full levy amount. The reason for that, and we'll get more, Rose will do her library presentation soon, but the reason for us asking for the full amount there is there have been discussions and plans and community input sessions surrounding what are we going to do with our current library. And so far the consensus has been based on a consultant putting together kind of a needs assessment. That assessment revealed that the best thing for the city would be to build a new library. And so we are proposing to take the full levy and begin to set aside some money in order to pay for that down the road if the city and the council so desire to move forward with that building process. But definitely this next year, we are proposing a reduction of the police operating levy by that 30 cents.
So, Mr. Chairman, so some might ask why one and what the other one and why not the other.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not asking that. I'm just saying some might want to know.
Yeah, again, we just feel the feedback that we're getting from the community, and again, we propose it. Y'all can change it. But the feedback we've gotten from the community is that our current library building doesn't meet our needs, doesn't meet the community's needs, and won't meet those needs. Well, will meet fewer needs in the future. And so we felt like it was prudent because the community will get that money back in a new library.
And I think it's also important to mention, so if you look at the wastewater facility, the wastewater treatment plant project that we've been working on, part of us being able to leverage grants has been that we have, what City Manager Tyree has said is skin in the game. We have dollars to provide towards the project to help assist in that project. And then as such, we've been able to leverage grant dollars and loan forgiveness that we maybe wouldn't have been able to leverage before. And so continuing the library levy at its full rate ensures that we can have skin in that game. When it comes time to pay for that new library, we will have the capacity and the ability to actually have some dollars to put into that project.
You're absolutely right. The money that we put in for the wastewater plant paid a big dividend.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, it's been very successful.
One of the past years, Dave, is the city hall is how we put money in.
Yeah.
Into
That's
the fund
exactly
for the
right.
city hall, so.
And you see what that does, so.
So before I would agree to that, I would want to know that the taxpayers would actually get the money, or whether it's going to go back into paying for the sheriff's department, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it is a part of that $10 or whatever, and when some of that goes down, everybody else puts their fingers in the pot and takes their share. So is the public really going to see a difference? I really want to know that.
As it stands right now, 25% of our commercial and residential land is not under some kind of compression. They would for sure see a benefit to us lowering what we're taking in the tax rate. There is an additional 75% that I could not tell you for sure, because it's possible that their homes may come out of compression depending on how things go over the next, let's be honest, 6 to 12 months. It is possible that instead of the police department getting that money, it could go towards reducing the compression on the Lynn County Sheriff's Office levy, the library levy here in Sweet Home, any of those levies that are currently out there. It is possible that the money will shift to those instead of going back to the property owners. Again, it's
got a
based on
question, Brandon.
compression.
What would that mean to like each individual household? I mean, 230,000 doesn't seem like a whole lot spread across everything. And then if there's a possibility of losing some of it, because that looks like some more officers or something, 230,000.
I think in this book, on page 18, so behind tab 3, there's a revenue summary, and we've included some assumptions in listed so that you could understand kind of what we went through for formulating this budget. We talked about the property tax revenue and for the police levy taking that 755 instead. For a $235,000 property, a property valued at $235,000, they would see a $70 savings in their property tax bill if their home is out of compression currently.
So the guy that has a $235,000 house will save $70 for the year?
Correct.
That doesn't seem like a whole lot to me. I'd rather just pay the $70 and have a couple more officers out there keeping our streets safe.
And that's why we bring this to the budget committee, to your attention. We really felt like this was something that deserved public input, because this is a levy that, one, is voted on every 5 years by the citizens of this community, and you as kind of those community representatives kind of get the ability to weigh in on that, whether that $70 savings for some residences is beneficial, or whether that $70 is better in the police department.
You're playing with a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Because basically it's, it's less than $6 a month, so.
Yeah, they don't like it when you mess with levies. Somehow it's gonna come back on you that you're trying to take advantage of them, even if they get $70 per year back. It's just kind of better to
Take
let
away,
that
you may not
piece
get back.
slide.
And you were talking, Jeff, about the possibility that your building is going to need some work besides the HVAC system, right?
Well, there's, again, we're 20 years old, so I mean, there's always that risk. I think right now we've built into this proposed budget enough more than what we anticipate any type of needs coming up this year.
So there's, again, I know at the last council meeting, I was smiling during like a 90-minute discussion we had, and the rest of you were pulling your hair out, and I was like enjoying it immensely. This is a very similar discussion in so much as what we're really weighing here are what do we think the community values more? A comment was made. If we don't need it, we shouldn't take it. And we're proposing something to you that says we don't think we need it, should we not take it? But in that time frame, the community has spoken on many occasions about how much they value the services the police department gives to our community. And that's why you all get paid the big bucks, especially those on this side of the room.
Wow.
And that's what the whole process and Oregon budget law is a pain in the rear on many places and many occasions. But this is one where this is what it's designed to do. It's designed for members of the public to give their input on what they value. And that's what's great about it. This is democracy.
That's
right?
what this table loves right now.
Yes, this is democracy at its finest, or at least a representative democracy, where we get to have those discussions. This is where it comes down to by the people, for the people, with the people, right? That's what y'all have signed up to do. So while some of you are struggling over this decision, I'm kind of over here smiling because I think this is what it's all about. This is why we're here. So this is where we're asking for your input. This is why This is why Counselor Trask says you guys should get a raise, jokingly, every week, we should get a raise. And
I'll go back to my statement. You're playing with a double-edged sword.
absolutely.
And I really, you take away, you may not get back.
And the only thing I like with being one vote, I like the idea of keeping it only because you can't see what the future is gonna hold. And if we don't, you have to use all that money, because the money that you would actually keep, hopefully it's going into another surplus fund or something, or maybe the next year increases in other expenses that maybe we can pull out of it, and plus, I like the extra security. And I can sleep at night without having to keep one eye open.
I actually think that having a potential carryover is not a bad thing.
Because I think you take away, if you're gonna give the $70 back to the people, then in 2 years or so, if you have to, or was it every 5 years for the money?
Yes.
But then some of those people are gonna forget in 5 years, what, is it gonna increase?
Well, which is thank you again for a fabulous segue to our next topic. So this is a voting year.
This is a levy
The
renewal.
levy renewals come up this November. And again, the way the levy works is when the voters vote, they basically vote a cap. The council and the budget committee have the ability to only take up to that much, but they can always take less. So there's something to be said that whether it was formally said or offhand, there's a contingency of people out there who have said, you said if you didn't need it, you'd give it back, or you wouldn't take it. And again, that's something to consider, because in November, people are going to make a decision on whether they want to approve that levy again or not, both of them.
But those people that say about, if you don't need it, don't take it, those also probably be the people that are going to scream when it goes up.
So I have a question.
Maybe, yeah.
Is the reason you don't need it so bad because of, again, the marijuana money, right? So, but what we do need is a new library. And maybe we should rethink where we're putting that money for now, because it's going to grow enormously, and use that money to help leverage us a new library for our community. I think that they could buy into that instead of giving that money to the police, because obviously you're saying we could save 30 cents on it, and it's only going to save a household $79 per year on a $200,000 house. Maybe we need to think about where we're budgeting that money that isn't part of that levy.
As a limited income guy, I'm telling you, that $6 would go a long way for me.
What?
Another
12 pack
of
of
Coca-Cola or
Coke.
something. This is a tough one.
It is.
This is tough.
This is a tough one, absolutely.
But I will tell you this, I can say 100%, I'm sure that if we don't take it, somebody else is going to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and like I said last year, and I'll say it again this year, in my opinion, the levies is a performance-driven levy. When the public's perception of the police department is very favorable, they have no problem passing a levy because they feel comfortable at night that they're being protected. If the public feels, well, I'm not getting my dollars, that's when you struggle with your levy. I don't see that with our police department. I think our police department does a phenomenal job. I personally don't think you're gonna have a problem with levy. And I might be ambitious with my thinking, but
Statistics will back up what you said exactly. When people are voting to tax themselves, statistically, they are much more likely to support something that they feel they're getting a return on their investment, and when it's guaranteed towards a singular cause. And what you've just said, this levy meets both of those criteria.
when Pat Gray came to me and she said, well, what do you think we should be, on the levy the first time? You want to take kind of a easy approach to the levy or be aggressive? I said, let's get aggressive. And look, and it paid. We got it passed. It's like the fire department. The people support our fire department immensely. Again, it's performance. Library, same way. I think we've done a phenomenal job with the library. Performance driven. It's
well, and all of our statistics indicate that.
Well, there'll be some negative stuff.
Sure.
Regardless which way we go.
Absolutely.
In my opinion, I don't
And I'm
think
gonna
we
send all
can
my
take it away.
messages to the mayor.
Sounds good. I personally
Or
think we should
to
take it
him,
away.
to Brandon. We'll pass it off to Brandon because he changed all this stuff.
I think Mr. Dix had a question
So,
or comment.
well, what I was just gonna say is most people don't understand how the levy works. They don't understand what goes into it or what anything about it. They just see the end result. So I think, like you just said, that they care about the result at the end of the day. So what result is gonna get us, like, get more people seeing the money being used? They don't care. I don't think they're gonna care about $10 or whatever it is. They're gonna be like, okay, that's my money because it's not going anywhere. But if it's going into something that they care about, then they're gonna do that. And that's, okay.
I would like to double check the number of homes that are out of compression. Because for some reason in my mind, I was thinking that number was like 60%, which if they're out of compression, they would see that return.
What do you always say? You always say what's best for the most?
For the longest period of time. That's what we're here for.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, the thing of it is it seems like we need it though. We're saying we won't use it if we don't need it, but we do need it. You just described a bunch of needs for it. So I don't know. I'm all for paying the extra $70 and keeping our streets safe because the criminals they're multiplying. They're not taking any time off. They're busy doing their meth and, starting up more meth labs. So it's the more we have, the safer our streets are going to be. And that's just the bottom line.
So you're basically a no, is that what you're saying?
What's that?
Nothing, I'm just.
More boots on the ground. That's all I want. Safer streets. Less tweakers, man.
I say we don't do it.
Less junk cars in our streets. Less tweakers, selling meth in our neighborhoods where, we got children playing in parks and stuff like that. That's kind of my opinion on it.
Well, I think we're all saying the same thing here.
It kind of sounds like.
Yeah, if that's the consensus of the group, then we'll put it back in. We just do what we're told. Well, we do what the majority of you tell us. Majority of you.
Can we put some of that money out of there to our big raise that we're gonna ask for?
Take that out of the marijuana money.
There you go.
You just pay in weed.
So Councilor Gorley brings up a really interesting opportunity though that we hadn't considered because that money is not bound to go in any particular place by law, is it?
I don't think so.
Just by action.
Right?
Just
Yeah,
by
we can make
action.
that call. She's correct.
No, the marijuana tax.
Oh, the marijuana tax, yes,
It was by council action.
we could move that if we wanted to.
She's absolutely correct. You can, it's not bound
That's
by the.
entirely up to us.
Look at Rose's face right now.
That would be a good start for a library.
And we don't have to use it.
With him.
I know we should drive. I think I've ever seen Rose smile that big.
Is that a car you want?
Marijuana shops, man. I didn't even see it.
Proud of her.
I agree with Lisa. I know our police department has done great. The building is only 20 years old. Library is like ancient. Is the carpet in there, Rose, or did you get new carpet?
No, same
Same
carpet,
carpet's been in there for 40 years.
same furniture, but we'll take
It's
it.
the same stuff. I really do. If you can make a switch somehow with the marijuana or take the tax money, take $3 less out of the 10 and put it towards the building.
So that we cannot fudge, if you collect the levy money, it has to stay for solely those expenses related to that. So we can't shift levy money. But what you're talking about is essentially shifting money, but legally. You take the full amount and then replace it with that marijuana money. The council has that flexibility to move.
Exactly.
We can do that.
Just move
Just to
this
clarify.
and back to there.
And if we move it, we might be able to get more grants because now we've got seed money.
Absolutely.
Exactly, once we have seed money.
And save the community
And Rose
money on the
agreed.
other end.
That's a great idea.
Literally seed money.
The raises.
We can have another philosophical argument about marijuana financing education, but.
And then less financing, getting rid of criminals.
Yeah.
Both, can do both.
I don't know whether the sales next year for marijuana are gonna be that high. I think they're probably all stashed up in the closet somewhere. I think they bought it all off the shelf. I mean.
Oh, it goes quicker than TP.
Okay, I'd like to get out of here before like
So,
10:30.
so it appears there is a consensus to move marijuana money out of the police department. I think that's gonna take a council resolution, is that correct, or no?
Yeah, we'll review that with Robert, but likely yes.
I think that's how it got there.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea. I mean,
And then it also consensus that we should ask for the full safety levy, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what we're hearing.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're happy to make the changes.
Okay, we're gonna need your cell phone number.
sounds like a win-win. I mean,
Does anybody have other questions for Jeff before he vacates the stand?
Jump up and hit your heels together.
I'm here all night. As long as you guys want, I'm here.
Yeah. We'll take a 5-minute break and then we'll get going again. Kind
of getting bossy.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's.
Okay, does anyone have questions for Chief Lynn?
I would like to bring one thing up if nobody has questions for the chief.
Okay.
So part of the police department budget, now that we're discussing this, taking the full levy that the committee would like to do, part of the police department budget, if you'll notice, is they have a very large contingency line. The contingency line for this proposed budget was built on the normal 3% of total expenditures, 2% of personnel. But we also included the full-time salary and benefits of a police officer in that contingency. So if property tax revenues next year were better than we had anticipated, we could come back to council and say, here's this money in contingency for a full-time officer. We think it would be best to move that back. Given that the committee wishes to put that $230,000 back in the budget, our question then is, would you like to move that money, that contingency money for that officer back to the personnel costs? Basically budget another full-time FTE. It's not in addition to what is currently happening in this year, but it would put another officer back on the street.
Yep.
And just to be clear, when we reorganized a couple of years ago and we added the 2 sergeants, so you used to have 4 shifts of 2 patrol and then 2 sergeants, which split between those 2 shifts. So what we've gone through the past 3 years is a sergeant and 2 patrol 24/7. Right now, just because of attrition, one of those shifts has a sergeant and 1 patrol. And that's that second patrol person is what we put into that contingency money. Now, last year, we added the additional second detective. We have not budgeted for that second detective at all in this budget. So we just want to make sure everybody is clear on that and what that means. So when you add this, so there's a full-time position in contingency, and if you put it back in because you're bringing in that $230,000, that will give you 4 shifts, 3 officers, 24/7. But we have not budgeted for that second detective. We're not laying anybody off. We're already short 2 spots right now. And we've just been holding off on filling them because of the unknowns with the economy. Does everyone understand that?
Mm-hmm.
So now what we're asking is, should we take that money out of contingency and just put it up in personnel and go ahead and fill it? Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah.
I think he should have what he needs. So that's what it is, that's what it is.
Any comment on that?
Jeff and Rose are gonna go out and celebrate when this is done, I think.
I guess that's also maybe a question back to Jeff Lynn.
But now,
What's,
well, I think we got to talk about the library proposal first before we go and jump into that. Just off the top of my head, just by looking at it real close. Rose requested a certain amount. You gave her an extra $50,000. So you're giving an extra 50, and then we're going to transfer over the.
If I could, let's try and stay in the police department.
This kind of is both incorporated though.
Okay.
Both incorporated with one another. If we're taking money to Peter to pay Paul and then putting back the levy back to Jeff and then giving Rose the 187, it's all kind of related to one another.
But we haven't gotten an amount for the transfer from the marijuana thing yet. We don't know what that's gonna be. And that really has nothing to do with, at this point, has nothing to do with him and another officer. It's that's gonna come out of the tax money or the levy money that we're not gonna decrease.
But I think what Mr. Brianna is trying to say is if the budget committee decides to move the planned marijuana the 187,000 that I think is budgeted in the police department right now. If your plan is to shift that to the library, you're reducing resources available for the police department and just supplementing them with the increased tax rate. It's not increased, the full tax rate. So you're kind of offsetting. And so if you then bring that position in, it kind of throws a different wrench in the budget.
Well, I may have misunderstood. I didn't realize we were gonna take the whole $186,000 or $7,000 and put it into the library. I did not.
Right. And there wasn't a full conversation on that. It was a proposal of what should we move some of that money?
Well, it's maintaining status quo on the police department for the levy, right? We're just maintaining status quo.
Right.
And what was being actually supplemented from the other money is saying, well, you guys are sustaining yourselves, you're doing fine, you really don't need that supplement. We're just not gonna put it in there. So is there enough money? And what does it look like what's left with the contingency fund? Can we have some contingency and fund that spot? Is that what you're asking?
Correct.
Okay,
So I think,
that's what I heard.
Yeah, so I took it though that you were asking if we take the full levy, does that put additional properties under compression? And then in turn, does that decrease what Rose will collect in her levy? No? Okay.
Last year, we had the contingency for the one police officer, correct? It was last year.
it was in the budget. It was not a contingency.
Budget,
Right?
Right.
It was already in there.
Right.
So now if we give him back the full levy, then he gets two more, correct?
No.
Just one.
You get one.
Just one.
Yeah.
So that, then we have two again. From last year, it was in the budget, and this year for what?
He'll be down one position from the budget last year, and it's that second detective.
Right.
Yeah.
So what I will do is put together kind of what this looks like.
Right.
And at the beginning of the next meeting, next Thursday, I think it is, we will walk through the changes related to the police department and the collection of the full levy, so you can kind of see what the dollars look like. And then from there, we can kind of settle on a decision.
That, but I'd like to have feedback from Chief Lynn regarding detective versus patrol.
Well, currently, from where we were, the full-time equivalents that we were allotted through this current fiscal year, we're down 2 officer positions. And so we've elected not to fill either of those officer positions for the time being because of the unknowns in the economy. This proposed budget we were proposing not to even consider necessarily filling one of those, but to put that second one in a contingency so that if the economic picture is fairly rosy, then we could go to council and ask to fill that position. I don't know really what the question is anymore. And the two that are the 2 vacant positions we have, one is patrol position that Mr. Towery mentioned, fills that patrol slot with a sergeant, and it would provide 2 patrol officers on that shift. The other position that we were not going to propose filling in this budget was the second detective position, and that serves detective functions, but also can rotate back and forth on patrol as needed. And that's actually, that detective right now is basically had been on patrol because of the attrition and the necessity. So I don't know what the question was anymore. I'm sorry.
I think they're looking for, is there a benefit to you to have that one contingency, the officer replacing contingency back on the
Yes.
budget?
Yes.
That was the question,
And Brandon, we don't really have any idea of how many people are not gonna be able to pay their taxes that get, that could be a thing too, that would be something that we might have an issue with.
Sure.
Because that could be a significant number.
Our normal property tax receipt rate is about 96%. So 96% of taxpayers pay their property
Yeah,
taxes.
but we didn't have a COVID thing last year.
Agreed. So what we have done is this budget actually says that 90% of our property taxpayers will pay.
That was 92.
92, sorry, 92.
Okay.
So that we did plan for a decrease, not knowing, and there isn't anything like this that we can really judge from.
Right.
We're using the housing picture, the housing crisis in 2008 as kind of our model for what may happen. And at the peak of that in fiscal years 2012 and 13, it was 92% of taxpayers were paying their property taxes. And so that's kind of the model we're using. It could be better than that, but because of the wild unknown, we are being almost extremely conservative in that.
Okay. Thank you, Chief Lynn.
Oh, you bet.
And we will move on now and Director, sorry for calling you up early before.
That's okay.
And it's section 8 in your notebook.
For those who don't know me, my name is Rose Pita. I'm the library director. It's been my honor to serve you for the last 8.5 years here in Sweet Home. The Sweet Home Public Library has been in existence for 78 years. We operate with myself, which is full-time, and 3 part-time staff. And it has been that way since eons. So just to talk about the library and kind of what we do beyond the books. Last year we did 42 programs and had 1,743 people in attendance. These programs included weekly story times with babies and toddlers and preschoolers. They're on 2 different days. We support the teachers and their curriculum by sharing our resources with them. We have a Read to the Dog program, which is beneficial for any child that has apprehensions about reading. The dog calms them. These are therapy and very well-trained dogs for that program. This last year, we had our first Oregon Battle of the Books team, and that team made it to the Elite 8 and were 2 points away from making it to the top 4. So they did really, really good, and they have a marvelous coach, a volunteer. We have many cultural programs, many musical programs, puppet programs, theatrical programs. And we also offer a summer reading program. Last year we had 302 students or children sign up. We offered 29 programs and over 900 kids in attendance. We do that program in partnership with the Boys and Girls Club because our facility doesn't have enough space for the amount of attendance that comes to that program. We also have free little libraries, 5 of them located throughout the community. We have an adult literacy program. We're partnering with LBCC, and we bring in tutors and have LBCC helps connect the tutor and the person wanting to learn to read better. We also do a weekly reading to the 1st and 2nd graders at Oak Heights. The library has participated in many events throughout the community, and I'm going to put these on because it's late in the day and my eyes are tired. We participate in the health fair, Trick or Treat Street, Harvest Festival, Farmers Market, and the Baby Blast, which is for newborns up at the Samaritan Hospital in Lebanon. They talk to their mothers about the importance of reading to their child even as the baby. The library, and we've started to notice this in the stage that we're in now with being closed to the public. The library is one of the only locations in this town where people can come and use a computer and print at no charge. I'm not going to say it's free because that's just not the truth. because nothing in life is free. Somebody is paying for it somewhere. But last year we had 5,797 individual logins and over 11,000 pages printed. So that's just one of the resources the library provides. We have a number of volunteers. We couldn't do a lot of the things that we do without our volunteers. And we have 18 volunteers and they served over 1,789 hours. We also have a wonderful Friends of the Library. If you haven't had an opportunity to go to their bookstore, well, you can't now, but when they open again, it's on the corner of 12th and Long. They're the only used bookstore in town, and the proceeds from that, minus their operating expenses, comes to the library. Last year, it was $6,600. In 2014, with the permission of the City Council, we joined the Lynn Libraries Consortium. And what that did is that expanded the access of our, for our community and our citizens to materials and resources that we would not be able to afford. In that, there's a 6-library consortium, and those are the Lynn Benton Community College, Albany Public, Lebanon Public, SCIO, Harrisburg, and Sweet Home. We have access to not only the materials that are available in their collections, but we also have access to the professionals that are in those collections, especially at LBCC and at Albany. You know, we have a part-time person who does our cataloging, but Albany has a full-time professional cataloger. And they are kind enough at this point to share their information and to help us out every once in a while. With that resource sharing and the support, the library saved $41,000 last year. So what that is in resource sharing, so what that is that is material that patrons put on hold. A courier brings it to our library, we check it out, patrons come to the library, use it, and then return it to our library, and then the courier takes it back. So that's just one of the things that has expanded over the years. So with the pandemic and the governor's orders, we have motivated or tried using Facebook and other means to encourage people to use all of our electronics resources, including our ebooks, and there's audiobooks on there too, downloadable audiobooks. There's lynda.com, and there's a number of databases that we've encouraged people to use. The other thing that we've done, and Greg isn't here right now, but we had Greg Springman, Public Works Director, come and look at our curbside delivery. So what that is we've put out a cart in the alley. Patron calls, we put the material out, and the staff go back in. Now this area that, I wish I could show you a picture. I should have gotten you a picture of it. The area, nobody can get in because I've moved the bike rack over there and I've chained it down. So you'd have to pick up this about a 4-foot bike rack. Anyway, the patron drives up, takes it off of the cart and drives off with their material. It's contactless delivery. It really is. They see staff because staff are standing there waving at them, but they never really interact with staff other than on the phone or by email. The other thing that we're doing with this COVID is that we are disinfecting the materials as they come in, and we quarantine them for 3 days. We have yet to read exactly how long this thing lives on materials and stuff. So just to protect our patrons, we figure a 3-day period before it goes out to anybody else. And our staff are are practicing social distancing, and so we're continuing to work at that. So plans for the future. We recently received a trust management grant, and what we're doing is we're buying new furniture for the teen and the children's area, and that will allow us to have some flexibility in those two areas. Right now, the furniture that we have in those areas came with the building in 1969, 50 years old, and that furniture is static, for a lack of a better word. And it doesn't allow us to set up or change it in any way whatsoever. So what we've done is we've for the children's area, we've gotten tables that can go from toddler to elementary height, and we've gotten different chairs for that. And for the teen space, we've gotten what they call flip top tables. You push a button, the top drops down, and you roll it off. And you can attest, City Manager Towery can attest to the weight of the furniture that is in there. He was going to be gallant and pick up the furniture and help me move it, and I thought, oh, this will be good. So I just stood there and I didn't offer to help him, and he picked up one end and looked at me like, oh my, this is heavy. So anyway, the other thing that we recently got was from the Confederated Tribes of Siletz. We got a grant to replace all of our public access computers. They were running on Windows 7. We had to upgrade to Windows 10. And when we did that upgrade, we also upgraded the public printing and photocopier, because all of the public printing now gets done on the photocopier. And so we got a color photocopier, and it's now in the building. So when people come back, they'll actually be able to print in color, and they haven't done that for a long time. So this pandemic has really reinforced the need for a larger library. When City Manager Towery came and said, we need to close, or can you do this social distancing at 6 feet? I got out my handy dandy tape measure that my brother gave me, and I measured, and no, there wasn't any way to do it. So, yeah, but with citizen input and approval from the City Council, we hired the architectural firm, FFA, and they have come through and they've done a library needs assessment. Their final report is under review right now, and it's still in a draft form, and it will be presented to City Council at a time when things settle down and things look a little rosier. But, they've taken and they've looked at the facility and brought in professionals from mechanical, electrical, structural, you name it. They brought them in and they gave us an evaluation on the building. So one of the things that I would like just to bring to everybody's mind too is that perhaps next year's budget will have the council, something will come before the council, possibly next year or the year after. It's a bequest. There's some land in Colorado that was left to the library. And that land will eventually, the lease on it will be expiring in 2021, late in 2021. And that land will go up for sale. Whatever the market is at that point, it'll be up to council to decide. That money will be split between two other entities and ourselves. It's a sizable piece of land, but market values for raising land in Colorado, I have no idea what they're valued at. But we have Shriners and Dornbeckers and us are the 3 recipients of this bequest. So that is just something to keep in mind for the library and funding in the future.
So maybe you won't need the marijuana money.
Maybe she can keep it.
Spend it on furniture.
So I wanted to go through, does anybody have any questions before I wrap
A
up?
question.
Yes.
Since you guys do so much for kids.
Yes.
I would bring up again, I come from a town that our library did stuff for the seniors as well.
Yes.
Seniors go to the library.
Yes.
We had a once a week, once a month, how to learn how to use a computer. Most of our seniors do not know how. I come from an era that I didn't have computers when I went to school. I've learned over the years how to use one, but there's so many seniors that don't know how to use a computer.
Yeah.
And I'd love to see that in their budget eventually, that you guys, when you either build a new library, you have a room dedicated for learning for seniors to learn how to use a computer.
Yeah, and it is actually in the proposal from FFA that that computers, that in the meeting room, it'd be wired so that we could do computer classes.
Because even your senior center doesn't do anything for seniors to learn how to use a computer.
Yeah.
Our town, the senior citizen center, as well as the library, did that.
You know, and the one thing with our staff, and the fact that we're such a small town, is we can sometimes connect a senior with someone to help them if our staff can't help them directly. Just recently, we taught a senior on how to use email, and because she wanted to correspond to her grandchildren that were off in other countries doing missionary work. So, you know, but we do, that is part of the plan and the hope that we can expand this, you know.
So Rose?
Yes.
In your budget on subscriptions, you don't have anything listed for actuals for 2018 and 19. You had regular subscriptions there.
Counselor Gorley, could you tell me what code?
Yeah, page 50, number 311, subscriptions.
Brandon probably need to put it on a different.
So that.
Yep, that's what it was.
Yeah, so it's Brandon. It's Brandon.
So when I started here, one of the first things I did with the first budget was expand and standardize the account code structure to fit governmental accounting. While yes, account codes had been set up across funds, they had been kind of set up in a way that not all of them had the same account codes. They had different names, they had different meanings, and so we standardized all that. This subscription line for the library is for basically newspaper subscriptions that come into the library that are not a part of kind of the general circulation like the books in the library. So the Democrat Herald is a current newspaper subscription, correct?
One of them. So the Democrat Herald, Albany, Democrat Herald, the Oregonian, and there's a third one. The Register Guard. Yeah.
So all of those things are now in this subscription line.
Yeah.
Right there. So,
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon.
I have a concern, Rose, about grants maybe not being as plentiful as they have been.
This is true. This is true. I've spoken with a, I don't know. She's with the Varga Group out of Vancouver, Washington. And she does a lot of consulting for major, like Red Cross and people like that. And she told me, she said that it'll take a couple of years Right now, I can tell you that a lot of the major grantors, Oregon Community Foundation, Ford Family Foundation, they've all partnered together and focused on COVID-19 and to get the nonprofits to recover from that. So she did tell me that it will take a couple of years, but she said that in the meantime, keep telling the story and keep talking. So, okay. So pretty much everything has stayed the same except for in the professional services line, you will see that that was a rather large jump from 2018 to 2019. And that was initially when we hired the FFA architects. I coded that into that line. And so that was about a $7,500 charge. But in the professional services, we have that line incorporates, oh, I had that note here. Turn this way so I can read. So that line incorporates
essentially.
So the courier, professional security, and that's another thing. We've upgraded all of our cameras at the library and added cameras, and labor relations and board law. So any expenses regarding those would go under professional security. Brandon, I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
That was it. I was just going to help you out.
Okay, thank you. Technical services include our contract with Step Up IT, OCLC, which is a worldwide cataloging. Anyway, it's a cataloging. We get our catalog records from them. Overdrive, LibData, Equinox, Fairconics, Archive Social, and lynda.com. There and some other miscellaneous small software. So it's a lot of the software and stuff that is required to not only function as a library, but also to have those public access computers to function. Okay. Do you have any specific questions about any of the materials expenditures? Councilor Coleman, I know that you had a couple about the postage.
Yes.
And again, we've broken these out because now we have these codes. Before, like Jeff had said, or Lynn had said, we used to put everything under our operating expenses, but now we're being more transparent. So there's, I put in $200 for mailing, and you're probably wondering what the library's mailing. We mail overdue notices, and we return shipping like to Amazon and stuff like that. So we have to pay for that, those kind of shipments. But a lot of it is the overdue notices. The printing, and even though we're in an age of where everything seems to be electronic, not everybody in our community has access to that. And so what we do is we print up what I want to call their half sheets, and we invite patrons to come to our events, publicity for our events. And and it seems to work when staff actually hand someone and say, we would really like to see you here, and we think you would enjoy it. That personal invitation works good. So yeah,
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see. The other one that has gone up is operating supplies, and that kind of coincides too with the book and periodical budgets down there, because they go hand in hand. So code 640 and code 612. So the operating Operating supplies, that's the materials for processing all of the DVDs, and the materials for the books on the Mylar and other things that we use for that. So if I increase the budget in the purchases, then I have to increase the money to, anyway. Okay, so, let's see. Building repair and maintenance, that's just ongoing upgrades and changes to a 50-year-old building that I can make at this time, you know, like keeping the windows clean and having people check it out and things like that. So, are there any other questions? Do you have anything?
So I guess I do have a question. Maybe this is a Brandon question. I don't know. So it's always a Brandon. So you have 12 months of contingency money, right? I mean, that's what this says, available money.
Yeah.
Right, 12 months.
Now I do.
So would it be prudent, or, I mean, that money is the library money regardless. Am I understanding this right? Okay, so it's not necessary to put it into capital unless if
It'll stay in the library.
But if Rose wants it to go into capital, if we perhaps, for instance, should have a windfall and be able to build a new building, can she move that money?
She could, yeah. As part, if it's not in the budget to do so, it would require council approval to transfer it to
Right.
a project or equipment reserve. But yes, that money could be transferred for that
But we
purpose.
would need to would we need to do a supplemental budget?
Yes, supplemental, yes, but it wouldn't necessarily require the convening of this full committee, depending on the dollar.
Okay.
What I would also add though is related to that is if you look at page 76, it's that 5-year forecast. It may be 12 months now for the library, but because the library budget of its size, 12 months goes away very quickly. And so at the end of this 5 years, you'll notice it becomes 6 months. And so while it may seem large now, the difference between the library budget of what, basically 480,000 a year versus 2.5 or $3 million, the money doesn't go as far.
Just want to check.
Okay, Blair, you got 10 minutes.
Okay, right.
Anything else? Okay, let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll be back here and see if there's any more questions.
Okay.
questions for Director Peter? Thank you so much. And now we're going to do community and economic development. And Director Larson.
Thank you.
You didn't sound very excited there.
Oh, wait. Hold on. Thank you. Thrilled to be here. All right. So my name is Blair Larson. Been with the city since last June, so fairly recent, and very glad to be here. Really enjoying living in Sweet Home and really enjoying working here. So community and economic development. It's a long name I think it's the longest name for a department the city has, because we do lots of different stuff. We do planning, we do building, we do engineering, we do code enforcement, and economic development. So we have basically one person for each of those things. So we don't have a lot of employees, but we have a wide variety of stuff. Planning is planning actions, getting a permit for making sure we have the right uses in the right parts of town. Building, of course, building inspections and everything related to that. Engineering does a wide variety of work for the city, from park design to street design to whatever maps we need, lots of stuff. Code enforcement is really basically enforcing the city's codes. Typically it has to do with the condition of properties, tall grass and weeds, occupied RVs that shouldn't be occupied. Those are kind of the main things, but a wide variety of things there as well. And then economic development is one of those things that really pretty much boils down to business climate in the city. We are doing our best to grow our own economy here in Sweden. All right, so things that we've been doing recently, and I apologize, this is probably too small for most people to read. So, like I said, I'm relatively new. That's been a change in the last year. And we've in our department, we've had a relatively recent increased focus on economic development, and I'll get to some of the reasons why that's happening later. But that's basically a lot of my work personally. I don't have any staff members to pass that off onto, but building relationships with our local businesses, marketing the city to potential businesses, working with the state on referrals for people that are looking for property, and working with the Chamber of Commerce and so forth to make sure that our community is one that's fertile for business. We've also recently had some success with grant applications. Our associate planner has been a rock star basically with grant applications. We've got $345,000 for Sankey Park through her efforts and other staff members' efforts as well. And so we're quite proud of that, and we're happy to see the improvements going up. We do have a commercial exterior improvement program that we run out of my department that provides grants to property owners of commercial property that want to beautify their property. We have, this may come up, but we do have some funds that have been set aside for economic development purposes, and those grants come out of that. It's a 50% match, essentially. You have a project, we can cover 50% of the costs in certain areas, that generally the exterior of your property. And that is something that I think we want to look at going forward, whether we want to tweak that program. The general consensus is that right now, our cap on for each project is $5,000. And when it comes to a lot of exterior work on buildings, it doesn't get you very far. And so the feedback we're getting from those who are using the program is that it really, if it's a larger amount, it will get used a lot more often and have more bang for the buck. But even so, we've done about 23,000 of those grants in the last year, And since it was kind of reorganized in 2018, we've done 35,500 in those grants. Our department is also currently analyzing all of our processes, looking at the way we operate, the permits that we give, to kind of explore, make sure we have documented what exactly that process looks like. This is useful information for a lot of purposes. Useful for succession planning. You know, if you have someone leave the city and you have to train somebody, you have a documented process so that everybody knows how to do it. The other benefit of that is that it allows you to take a critical look at how you're operating so that you can find ways that you could either move faster, save money, make it more convenient for the applicant. And that's really what we want to do is be more efficient, utilize public funds better when it comes to our staff time, but also make the experience a lot more pleasant for those who are applying for permits, because nobody enjoys getting a building permit. Right, you want to decrease the pain as much as you can. Okay, now the budget is for my department is starting on page 42. There's not a ton different from last year, and there's not really a lot to it. Most of our budget is devoted toward personnel, our 5 staff members. The one area that you'll see that is probably brings more questions to mind is professional services. And so in my presentation, I pretty much focused on that, but I'd be happy to take questions about other items as well. I just don't see anything that's really all that unusual in those, but perhaps you do, and so feel free to ask those. But when it comes to professional services, right now, let's see. We have, the proposed budget is 140. Yes, 140,000. So that's made up of several things. First, we have a contract with Northwest Code Professionals for building inspection services. And so we pay for that contract out of that line. We also have a contract with the Cascades West Council of Governments for planning services. We also are in the middle of updating our development code, and Morgan CPS is a firm that is helping us through that process. And then I also have planned about 10,000 in there for code enforcement abatement. Now I'd like to talk about each one of those things and why we have them. So Northwest Code Professionals provides our building inspection services. One of the reasons why this is beneficial to the city to have an outside contractor is that way we don't need to have our own building inspector. We have a firm that takes care of that. Building services tend to fluctuate wildly. When things are good, they're really good, but when things are bad, you've got a staff member with lots of time on their hands and no way to pay them. And so contracting out for that work is really cost effective for the city. It also means that they have a deeper level of expertise for inspections. We don't have to worry about making sure that our one building inspector is qualified in every area. They can handle all of it. So that's been in place for several years, and we are obviously planning on continuing that. It's about 60,000 a year that we spend on that.
How much?
60,000. The planning contract with Cascades West Council of Governments, also known as the COG, that's the term we use, Council of Governments, just easier to say COG. That started last year, prior to my arrival here. The intent behind that contract is to essentially free up time for my position to work on economic development. That way, they can provide planning expertise that is difficult to recruit for. We have an associate planner who came on board relatively recently and is not as experienced as planners in other communities. And so what we're able to do is free up my time to work on economic development with this contract, but also have experienced planning personnel that we can use for more complex planning needs, but also use as kind of a review of our associate planner's work. If we had a senior planner on board, that person would be doing that. But as our associate planner gains more and more experience, we are kind of weaning off those needs off of the contract. And so already in the last year, we've seen a number of planning actions that we are sending to the COG less and less because she has gained more experience and knows more about how to do it. So it's something that we envision right now. This 55,000 for next year that we're looking at, we actually spend more than that on a quarterly basis because we have been using them more in the last year. And as things progress, we're starting to try to use them less and less because we have that capability. But at the same time, there are some planning actions that are more complex and that can be more unusual. And it helps to have that contract in place so that we can get that access to that talent. I mentioned just about the, well, I guess I'll go on to that. The development code update does impact this. So development code, for those who aren't aware what that actually is, essentially that is the section of our laws that dictates what kind of use can be in what zone and what zones in what part of the city. And there's a number of regulations that affects the way your neighborhood is. The reason why it's the way it is because of the zone and the rules in that code. How far back from the street your house has to be, how big your lot is, what size, what configuration your lot typically has. That's all part of the development code. The code we have is been in place for a long time, and it's kind of unwieldy. It's difficult to work with, and it's not well understood. And so part of this update, the intention behind the update is to make it more clear to people who are seeking a permit, easier to work with for developers, but also easier to work with for staff, because as it is now, every time we have questions in different areas, it's very cumbersome and difficult to go searching through the code to find the right answer. And so the city has contracted Morgan CPS to help us through that process. That's already begun, and we expect it to finish next fiscal year. With our contract with the COG and our planning, the staff that we have available, we expect that this code update will have a significant impact on what we're able to do on our own, because we'll have a staff member who's involved during this process of overhauling it. And we're making an effort to make that code significantly easier and more similar to other communities in the area, easier for developers. And in general, we just expect this to have a big impact when it comes to staff time on different projects. Finally, code enforcement abatements. Code enforcement is kind of a tricky thing sometimes because it works best when people willingly correct problems on their properties. That being said, there are lots of times when people aren't so cooperative or we can't get a hold of them. There are, if you have a property that out-of-state owner or out of the area owner, all we have is an address and we get returned mail from that address, it creates a problem where we have a violation in place. Sometimes it's a dangerous violation that needs to be rectified as soon as possible. Sometimes it's just something like, oh, we just need something to mow that property. But eventually you get to the point where the city does have to step in and take care of the problem. When that happens, the city does the work and then puts a lien on the property for that work. And eventually that lien is paid off. The problem is you have a gap between when the city puts out the money and when the city would get the money back again. And so the intent behind holding up this money here is just to make sure that we have a pot of funding available to take care of those things and then later get paid back.
Code enforcement, your person that does code enforcement, does he ride around the town or does he just go out when somebody calls on a complaint?
He responds both to complaints and to things that he's found as well.
Now, I know we're not here to discuss a person's property, but the property right there by Mart, the side of it, the grass must be about waist high, trash. It looks like a junkyard, garbage all over it. Disgrace, you know, I'm surprised code enforcement hasn't cleaned it up. And I've been here 2 years and it's still like that.
He knows all about it though.
Yep.
And that's the thing is there's a number of properties that are on the list and that are being worked on, and it's not always apparent what stage in the code enforcement process where they are. I'd be happy to look at that specific case if you'd like.
Because every time I live pretty close to it. When I drive into like McDonald's for coffee in the morning, I sometimes see rats jumping off the property across to like Mart and stuff. So, you know, I would want to be the next door neighbor thinking, getting snakes or rats in my yard because this year guy's not taking, guy, girl, whoever it is,
right,
I'm not taking care of their property.
Right. And I, like I said, I'd be happy to look at that particular case. Most of the time, those are in the works of being worked on, and it's just not, either it's somewhere in the stage where it hasn't been, the property owner hasn't rectified it yet, and it hasn't gotten to the point where the city can step in and do it.
Does it take 2 years?
That's a good question. I'd have to look at this. I'd have to look at the specific property.
It's still.
Yeah. And I encourage you to call our code enforcement officer, and he's always able to take a complaint and add it to his arsenal, essentially. Every time he gets a complaint, it's ammunition for him. And that's a good thing. But he also can update you on what's been done already on that property. And there's usually more to the story. I don't know the specifics on that particular property, but there's usually more to the story on why it's the way it is. Sometimes, like I said, it's an uncooperative property owner. Sometimes there's more complicated things than that involved.
So I have a question. On page 44, you have cleaning supplies and adopted for 2020, $1,500. I think it's just up a line. I think that goes down to 612 operating supplies because it would align with that 1,500.
Yeah, I would defer to Brandon on that one.
I think it's just
numbering.
I typed in a line above it.
Well, actually, they don't need cleaning supplies.
Yeah, we don't tip it well. We do now. That could be a number, a way it's reflected in the numbering.
Yes, it should be an operating.
Yeah.
Should be a line for PPE.
So, and then that brought me to 550, duplicating and printing the $2,100. Is that just something we've started and we're not going to need anymore, or what's going on there?
So that should be, now our duplicating and printing,
at 550.
we have a contract for our copier, and that's paid out of another line. That's the 2019 actual.
Duplicating and printing is a new account code.
Yeah.
And probably should have put money in there, but likely what that means is that another line in the budget has kind of assumed that responsibility for now, and we'll have to split it out another time in a different budget, but it's probably in office supplies or something like that.
Because I would think that your office would have a lot of printing going on.
Yeah, there is. Ray, did you have a comment on?
Oh, I was just going to offer to talk to Mr. Lohman. I have some inside information from Tommy on that property, so I'd be happy to talk to you about it after.
I believe it's number 1 on his list. He's been there more than fines
Yeah.
they need to know.
He's definitely aware of it. I know
Yeah,
that.
and another thing right now is there's no court. So even if you cite somebody right now, we're not able to hold court right now, so. But yeah, there's actually, I can chat with you a little bit afterwards, or maybe next week. That's not 11.
For budget purposes though, my main goal is to ensure that there's money available so that if it does get to the point where we need to abate, we have the funding to pay for it. Because we don't want to be in the position where a violation continues and we just can't afford to do
In
this.
some cases, that payment don't even cover it.
And that's true, but it is something. I mean, there's some violations where the insurance coverage necessary for a firm to take on that job and the hazardous materials that they might run across can go into far higher amounts than that. And that's concerning, of course, but we don't have the funding to be able to match those levels of needs.
If I was the next door neighbor, I'd want you to use some of your grant money to clean it.
So, excuse me, we're here to talk about budget, and we are talking about a citizen's property right now publicly. And I don't think that's probably appropriate because it's not on the agenda.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, you gave us those 4 people, but how does that up to $499,000?
No, 140,000 for professional services.
Personal services?
No, professional services.
Okay.
Personal services would be salaries for the 5
And
staff
materials and supplies, how did you go from
So,
2 years ago at 91,000, just maybe, I'm sure Brandon must have thrown something in here.
Part of that is, so if you look at the economic development line, 810, the council established.
That's the $450,000 we threw in there.
Right. The council established a commercial exterior improvement program. We budgeted all $464,696. Doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be spent, but we allocated the dollars.
Okay, that's my only question.
Any other questions? Okay, let's break for 5 minutes. We'll come back and
I think we'll be done.
see if we have any other questions.
I'm gonna be gone in 4 minutes.
Thank you. Thank the good Lord.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions? Other than that, I think that concludes our meeting.
I do want to say thank you. I know that was a lot, and a lot of good information, I think, for everybody. But as always, if there are questions, if you digest this and overnight you are dreaming of numbers and you wake up in the morning and decide, I need to ask Brandon some questions.
If I wake up at 2 in the morning and have a question, I'm calling you.
Good thing my phone is on silent. But seriously, if you have questions, let us know. We're happy to answer them. We'll do whatever we can. Thank you.
I appreciate staff being here this late.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Well, some of it I don't care if they're here late.
Well,
You know what I mean? That's
You could
the
have
ones that
gone
really
home
do
earlier.
stuff.
That's kind of what it is.
Yeah, it's Thursday.
Oh, yeah, our next meeting is, not this Thursday, but next Thursday, May 14th at 6 o'clock.
Thank you. Thank you.
You can have that can.
Can I?
I'll
take that out of here.
See, I'll get everybody to-
Next meeting on the 12th.